Hi guys. Tonight we walk into a silence so deep you can hear the snow itself breathing. The world around you is white and endless. The air so cold it feels like glass in your lungs. You pull your blanket tighter, knowing that if this were a winter 10,000 years ago, somewhere in the Great Plains or the northern woodlands, you probably wouldn't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you are at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where in the world you are listening from. Now, dim the lights and let your imagination settle into the hush of a snowbound night. You stand among the first peoples of North America, long before the world of chimneys and fireplaces. Around you, the horizon stretches wide and pale. The sun is weak, a golden coin sinking into an ocean of frost. The air smells faintly of pine and frozen water. Every breath you take turns to mist before vanishing into the wind. The quiet feels ancient, patient, and slightly dangerous. You can almost hear time itself slowing down. The people around you move deliberately, their footsteps muffled in deep drifts. They do not complain about the cold because they have made peace with it. Their homes, their clothing, even their thoughts are shaped by winter. Every action, every gesture, carries the calm precision of those who have lived with ice as both teacher and enemy. It is not a battle, it is a negotiation. The cold will take what it can, and you must offer as little as possible. You notice the way their breath clouds together, forming little halos that merge and fade. There is no fireplace waiting at the end of the day, no flickering hearth. Yet, somehow, these people stay alive. You feel a quiet wonder creep into your chest. How did they do it? How did they build warmth in a world that wanted to freeze them solid? The truth is that warmth, for them, was not just about temperature. It was about community, movement, and wisdom passed from one generation to the next. They knew how to read the wind, how to shape the land to their advantage, and how to coax life out of what looked like death. You watch as a woman bends low to the snow, pressing her hand against the crust, reading its story like a page. The crackle beneath her palm tells her what kind of storm came last, and what kind might be coming. The snow speaks, and she listens. It is easy to forget that the Americas before European contact were not untouched wilderness. They were home to thousands of cultures, each with its own relationship to the seasons. Some lived in the frozen tundra of the north, others in forests thick with pine and birch, and still others on the plains where the wind could slice through you like a blade. In each of these places, the people found their own definition of warmth. For the Inuit, warmth meant stone lamps burning seal oil. For the Lakota, it meant buffalo hides layered so thick they made tiny worlds of shelter. For the Iroquois, it meant longhouses with communal fires that pulsed like slow hearts in the dark. A mainstream fact: archaeologists studying northern plains winter camps have found evidence of earth lodges so efficient they could maintain tolerable temperatures even when outside temperatures dropped below -30. The secret was insulation, not flames. The thick packed earth walls trapped heat from small fires and human bodies, creating a pocket of livable air amid the ice. But there is a quirky detail that does not make it into many textbooks. Some tribes were known to spread a thin layer of animal fat along the inside walls of their shelters. The grease helped seal cracks and prevented drafts from creeping through. A kind of prehistoric weatherproofing, both practical and slightly ingenious. Historians still argue whether the earliest people who crossed the Bering Land Bridge arrived with winter technologies already developed in Asia, or whether they invented them anew once they encountered the brutal North American climate. Some argue for ancient continuity, others see distinct local adaptations. Either way, what they achieved here was nothing short of remarkable. You feel the respect rising in you like heat from a hidden ember. Imagine the sound of snow underfoot. It squeaks at first, sharp and dry, then softens as the crystals compress. The wind hums through bare branches like distant voices. You pull your furs closer, your hands numb, but your curiosity keeps you awake. The people move like shadows, quietly efficient. A hunter returns from the trees, dragging the frozen shape of a deer. The village gathers without ceremony. They know what must be done. The meat will feed the group for days, and the hide will become another layer against the cold. Even the bones will serve tools, needles, ornaments, and sometimes toys for children who laugh despite the weather. It strikes you that for them, survival was not a desperate act. It was routine, built into the rhythm of life. They did not curse the winter. They prepared for it all year long. Every berry dried in the summer, every hide tanned in the fall, every song sung around the fire had purpose. You might find it hard to believe, but many native nations actually saw winter not as a time of scarcity, but as a time of rest. The fast pace of hunting and travel slowed. People stayed close, repaired clothing, told stories, and renewed their sense of belonging. Winter was harsh, yes, but it was also intimate. The deeper night comes, and the stars spread across the sky like salt on black velvet. You listen to the breathing of the people around you, steady and warm. Somewhere nearby, an elder begins to hum. The tune rises slowly, like smoke, curling into the air. The melody carries no words, but it speaks of endurance and gratitude. You imagine lying beneath your blanket of fur, feeling the earth beneath you still holding the faint memory of yesterday's sun. You are part of something older than memory. Your eyelids grow heavy, but the story continues. You think of how modern people bundle themselves in electric heat and central air, how we build walls so thick we forget the rhythm of the weather outside. These early peoples had no such luxury. They lived within the heartbeat of the seasons, adjusting themselves rather than bending the world. There is something humbling in that. As you drift in this quiet world, you realize that warmth, for them, was not measured in degrees but in togetherness. The tribe was the hearth, the family was the fire. Their survival was a collective act, a web of care and knowledge stretching across generations. The cold might have ruled the land, but the people ruled the art of adaptation. You look around one last time before closing your eyes. The snow glows faintly blue under the moonlight. A child laughs somewhere in the distance. The wind sighs, slipping through the pine needles. You breathe in the cold air, feel it sharpen your senses, and for a moment you understand what they knew all along, that even in the deepest winter, there is a kind of warmth that no fire can give. You wake to the sound of snow sliding off the roof above you, soft as a sigh. The air smells faintly of smoke and hides. Your breath curls upward in pale ribbons, shimmering in the dim morning light. The world outside is still frozen, but inside this small shelter, it feels almost bearable. You stretch your fingers, surprised to find warmth clinging to the air. There is no fireplace, no glowing hearth, yet you are not shivering. How did they manage this? You blink into the muted light filtering through the small doorway. The walls curve around you, built not from stone or bricks but from life itself. Bark, branches, and animal bones form the skeleton of the lodge, layered thickly with grass and clay. Every material here tells a story. The bark remembers storms, the bones remember movement, and the clay remembers the touch of human hands pressing it into place before the freeze. You run your fingers along the wall and feel the subtle give of the earth. It is alive in its own quiet way. Outside, you see other shelters scattered across the snowy plain. Some look like mounds, half swallowed by the ground. Others stand upright, slender cones of hide stretched tight over poles, their tips trailing thin streams of smoke. No two are quite the same, yet each belongs perfectly to its place. A buffalo hide tipi glows faintly from within, like a lantern in the storm. An earthen lodge sits squat and patient, the shape of endurance itself. A snow-covered longhouse stretches across the horizon, big enough to hold entire families, even clans, under one roof. The ingenuity of these designs feels almost unreal. Without chimneys or modern insulation, native peoples found ways to trap every bit of warmth they could. The secret was not to fight nature, but to flow with it. You notice how low the entrances are, forcing everyone to crouch when entering. The heat stays close to the ground, pooling like water. Above, small smoke holes let out just enough air to keep the space breathable. Sometimes, people hung hides or mats over the holes to adjust airflow, mastering temperature control long before the word ventilation existed. A mainstream historical fact: among the Mandan and Hidatsa peoples of the northern plains, archaeologists have reconstructed massive earth lodges that could house up to 30 or 40 people. The thick domed roofs were supported by wooden beams and layered with sod and earth. Tests have shown that even during fierce Dakota winters, the interiors stayed well above freezing, heated only by body warmth and small fires in central pits. But here's a fringe tidbit. Some accounts describe how women would hang fresh animal hides or wet grass along the lodge walls to freeze solid, forming an extra icy shell that trapped the heat inside. It sounds backward, but it worked like a natural refrigerator in reverse, sealing warmth in and cold out. Historians still debate whether these designs emerged from shared innovation across tribes or evolved independently in response to regional climates. Some anthropologists suggest a network of idea sharing that stretched from the Great Plains to the subarctic tundra, while others believe each group simply learned through long trial and error, guided by the land itself. Either way, the result was architecture both practical and poetic. You duck back inside, feeling the difference instantly. The warmth hugs your skin, delicate and persistent. In the center of the space, there is a small depression filled with glowing stones rather than flames. The stones have been heated outside and carried in carefully, radiating heat for hours. Beside them, dried herbs smolder slowly, their scent earthy and sweet. The smoke curls lazily, finding its way through the small hole above. Around the pit, people sit cross-legged, their faces calm. The crackling of stones replaces the roar of fire. It is quieter this way, less wasteful, more contained. You run your hand along a buffalo hide, draped over a sleeping area. It is soft and thick, still faintly smelling of animal and smoke. The bedding is made of layered grasses, furs, and woven mats. Each layer traps air, creating insulation as effective as any blanket from the modern age. You realize that nothing here is accidental. Even the placement of the sleeping spots, often toward the back of the shelter or nearest the warmest wall, follows rules learned through generations of experience. The outside world howls with cold, but here, the rhythm of life continues unbroken. Someone grinds dried corn into meal. A child plays with a carved bone figure, giggling quietly. An elder hums under his breath, his fingers repairing a fur parka by the faint light. You listen to these sounds, the ordinary noises of survival, and feel something close to reverence. They have created not only warmth but comfort, an ecosystem of small miracles woven together by knowledge and patience. Step outside again for a moment. The air bites, sharp as flint. You can see the layers of construction more clearly now. The outer hides of a tipi gleam faintly with frost, but beneath them lie 2 or even 3 additional layers, sometimes stuffed with dried grass or moss to keep the wind from slipping through. When snow falls, it piles around the base, forming a natural skirt that blocks drafts. What looks fragile from a distance is, in truth, a fortress of warmth disguised as simplicity. A group of men work quietly nearby, replacing a cracked pole in one of the lodges. Their tools are bone and stone, their movements practiced. You notice that even their repairs follow a seasonal rhythm. Some shelters are meant to be taken down in spring and rebuilt in autumn. Others, like the massive earth lodges, last for years, their roofs sometimes sprouting grass in summer. You imagine standing there in springtime, seeing green shoots rise from what once was the roof over your head. It feels poetic, almost sacred, that homes could literally return to the earth when their purpose was done. There is another small but striking detail. The entrances often face east, welcoming the first light of dawn. Morning sunlight warms the interior naturally. drying out damp hides and lifting spirits. You can almost feel it now, that slow warmth creeping across the ground as the sun climbs the horizon. It is a reminder that design was never just about function, it was about balance, respect, and renewal. Inside again, a faint hum of conversation continues. You hear the rustle of hides, the soft clinking of tools, and beneath it all, the heartbeat rhythm of quiet survival. You lie back, letting the low heat seep into your bones. The roof creaks softly under the weight of snow, but you are safe. The air feels heavy and still, as if it understands your need for rest. It occurs to you how different this is from the modern obsession with endless control. Here, warmth is not commanded but invited. People work with the land, not against it. You wonder how much knowledge was lost when chimneys replaced stone pits and insulation became something hidden in walls. The wisdom of these shelters is not written down. It lives in muscle memory, in the slow movements of those who build with their hands. You close your eyes for a moment and imagine the snow still falling outside, a white curtain between the world of the living and the sleeping. Somewhere in that frozen silence, another family settles into their own bark and bone shelter, trusting in their craft and in each other. You feel the same calm they must have felt, the quiet conviction that warmth is something you make, not something you find. The night deepens again, the stars return, and the earth holds its breath beneath the weight of snow. The lodge sighs gently, and the stones still glow faintly, their heat soft and steady. You are part of this now, another sleeper beneath the bark and bone. The cold will wait outside. You wake before dawn, the world still wrapped in a blue half-light. Frost glitters on the inside of your shelter like a thin veil of stars. The air bites your nose, but you are not freezing. Outside, a quiet hum of movement begins. You hear someone scraping ice from the entrance, another stirring embers in a small pit. The day's rhythm starts slowly, as if even time itself moves more carefully in the cold. Today, you follow a group that is heading underground. They walk toward the riverbank, where the snow drifts higher than a man's shoulders. Beneath that whiteness lies something remarkable. Homes built into the earth itself. The entrance looks like a small hole, easy to miss unless you know what to search for. You stoop low and follow them inside, ducking into a tunnel that smells of soil and dry grass. The air shifts. It is still cold, but the sharp edge is gone. Beneath the ground, the wind cannot reach you. Your eyes adjust slowly to the dimness. What you find feels almost secret. The walls curve around you, smooth and dark, made of packed earth and lined with woven mats. Above, a layer of logs forms the ceiling, covered again by layers of sod. These homes are part of the land itself, a natural insulation chamber that traps warmth and keeps out the worst of the storm. Some groups call them pit houses. Others know them by different names, but the idea is the same. The ground, they discovered, is the best blanket of all. Archaeological studies in the Northwest Plateau and subarctic regions reveal that some pit houses could hold steady temperatures even when outside air dropped below -20. The soil worked as a thermal barrier, absorbing heat during the day and releasing it slowly through the night. Imagine living in a place where you can hear the earth breathing with you. You feel its heartbeat under your palms as you touch the wall. A curious record from early explorers describes how these dwellings often had an ingenious two-door system. One entrance was for daily use, while the other, smaller and lower, served as an emergency exit or as a place for cold air to sink away. The people understood air circulation intuitively. They did not need blueprints or thermometers. Their knowledge was drawn from generations of observation and experiment, whispered from parent to child beside the glow of a tallow lamp. Some experts remain divided on how widespread these semi-subterranean homes were across North America. Certain archaeologists see them as unique to northern climates, while others find traces of similar designs far to the south, suggesting that this concept may have spread along ancient trade routes. The truth, perhaps, lies somewhere between, a shared human instinct to seek warmth within the womb of the earth. As you settle inside, the soft murmur of voices surrounds you. A family prepares food near a small central pit. The light comes not from open fire but from a stone lamp filled with animal fat, its wick glowing like a captured star. The smell is faintly oily, but comforting. The mother stirs a pot of thawed fish, its steam filling the room with salt and life. Children laugh quietly, playing with carved figurines in the corner. The floor is covered with grass mats that rustle softly when someone moves. You sit cross-legged, letting the gentle warmth seep into your legs. What strikes you most is how the structure breathes. You can feel the gentle pull of air through the vent shaft, rising just enough to keep the smoke from lingering. It is not perfect, but it works. Some groups placed flat stones over the vent holes, adjusting them with sticks to control the draft. Others built narrow side tunnels that acted like modern airlocks, preventing gusts from entering. The design seems simple, yet it is the product of deep observation of how heat behaves in enclosed spaces. According to traditional oral accounts from the far north, people sometimes shared these underground homes with animals in the harshest months. Dogs, reindeer, or small livestock added body heat, turning the shelter into a living furnace. The smell must have been intense, but warmth was life. And when every heartbeat mattered, comfort became a luxury, easily forgotten. There is a legend told by one Arctic community about a woman who lived in such a house so long that her heartbeat became one with the soil. When she died, the earth refused to freeze over her grave. Even in January, the ground stayed soft and warm. The story reminds you that these people did not see the land as a thing to conquer. They lived inside it, part of its breath, its seasons, its rhythm. A researcher once noted that modern energy-efficient homes use almost the same principle. Builders today call it earth sheltering, where walls are partly buried to take advantage of the earth's steady temperature. In a way, ancient indigenous engineers were pioneers of sustainable design long before the phrase ever existed. Their architecture did not shout, it whispered. You notice something else too. The silence inside is unlike any other. The earth absorbs sound as well as cold. Conversations stay close, soft, intimate. In this hush, people think differently. They speak slower, listen longer. You imagine winter nights here, when the lamplight flickers and shadows dance along the curved walls. Stories flow like smoke slow, winding and full of memory. In one corner, you see storage pits dug into the floor, covered with slabs of bark. Inside them are dried berries, smoked fish, and bundles of roots. The cold of the soil keeps everything from spoiling. Nothing goes to waste. Even the walls sometimes hold hidden compartments where tools or seeds are kept safe until spring. These homes are not just shelters, they are archives of survival. A traveller's diary from the 18th century describes the eerie beauty of emerging from one of these houses after weeks of storms. The door would open into a blinding white world, the air so sharp it burned the throat. Yet inside, the people stepped out strong and unbroken. The visitor wrote that, "The snow is not their enemy but their servant." You smile, thinking how poetic that sounds. Yet it is true. Snow, for them, was both obstacle and ally. Scholars today marvel at how well these ancient techniques align with modern principles of energy conservation. The structures used local materials, recycled the warmth of living bodies, and left almost no permanent scars on the land. When abandoned, the earth simply reclaimed them. If you returned centuries later, you might never guess people had lived there at all. You lie down on a mat near the wall. The air feels dense but peaceful. Above you, the roof creaks faintly, a reminder that winter is still pressing down. You imagine drifting into sleep, hearing the distant pulse of frozen rivers, the shuffle of people outside, the sigh of soil shifting. The warmth holds steady. You realize that this way of living humble, patient, intertwined with the earth was never primitive. It was genius. As your eyes close, you understand what the elders must have known. that the ground beneath your body is not just dirt. It is memory, warmth, and protection. In this underground world, the cold loses its power. You are safe here, held by the oldest blanket of all. The morning light grows brighter, bouncing off the snow like glass. You pull your cloak tighter and step outside, feeling the sting of the cold kiss your cheeks. The sky is pale, the color of bone. You follow the soft crunch of footsteps leading toward a clearing where hides and furs hang in neat rows. The smell of smoke, leather, and tallow drifts through the air. It is the scent of survival itself. You pause to watch a woman working with quiet precision. She stretches a hide over a wooden frame, scraping it carefully with a curved tool made from a deer's rib. The sound is soft but steady, a rhythm that feels as old as the wind. Around her, other women sit cross-legged, sewing, plaiting sinew, trimming furs. Their fingers move quickly despite the cold. Every stitch, every cut, is a calculation between comfort and endurance. You slip your hands into a pair of fur mitts lined with rabbit down. The heat builds almost instantly. You can feel the life that once pulsed through the material still clinging to it somehow. This is not mere clothing. It is armor, science, and tradition all woven into one. Ethnographers have noted that many northern tribes, from the Cree to the Ojibwe, crafted double-layered garments that functioned much like modern thermal wear. The outer layer, usually made of caribou or buffalo hide, repelled wind and snow, while the inner lining of rabbit or beaver fur trapped heat. The air between these layers worked as insulation, preserving warmth with astonishing efficiency. Curiously, some elders from the Arctic regions have told stories about hunters who wore birdskins during milder winters, the feathers still attached to hold heat. It sounds improbable, until you remember that down is still used today, in parkas and bedding. What seemed like magic to early explorers was actually precise, generational knowledge of how to trap warmth with minimal resources. Anthropologists still discuss whether the tailoring methods of different regions like the Arctic parkas, the plains robes, or the woodland leggings developed independently or through cultural exchange. There is evidence of both. Trade routes carried not only goods but also techniques, stitching patterns, ways of softening hides, even dyes made from roots or berries. Knowledge traveled quietly, along with stories and songs. You walk closer to the workers and notice how they use sinew, the tough tendon taken from animal backs, as thread. When dried and twisted, it becomes stronger than modern synthetic fibers. Once it is wet, it swells to seal seams against moisture. You can almost hear the whisper of ingenuity in the air, soft as the thread slipping through the hide. The clothes they make are not uniform. Every detail, fringe, bead, paint serves a purpose. The fringe on sleeves and hems, for instance, sheds melting snow so it doesn't soak into the fabric. The dyes, often made from earth pigments or bark, help camouflage hunters against the frozen landscape. The beauty of the garments is never decoration alone. It is function disguised as grace. You watch as a child tries on a new coat. It is oversized, but that is intentional. Loose clothing traps warm air better than tight layers. The child twirls, the fur brushing the snow, giggling. The mother smiles and adjusts the hood, pulling it forward so the fur ruff frames the child's face. That circle of fur does more than look pretty. It creates a pocket of calm air, stopping wind from cutting across the skin. A French fur trader once wrote in his journal that he had never seen people so comfortable in a place so inhospitable. He described their coats as living houses, soft yet nearly impenetrable to cold. He tried to copy one but failed. His seams leaked, his hide stiffened. The difference, he realized, was not the material but the memory in the hands that made it. Modern researchers have confirmed that traditional clothing of the Inuit and other northern nations surpasses many synthetic winter coats in warmth and breathability. Even the layering of fur direction, outer furs facing outward, inner ones inward, was deliberate, a balance between repelling moisture and holding heat. You can almost feel that wisdom wrapping around you now, snug and precise. There's another unexpected trick. In some communities, people stuffed fine dried grasses or moss between clothing layers for added warmth. It worked like a natural insulation pad and could be replaced daily. The same materials were used in baby carriers, keeping infants warm even in sub-zero conditions. Imagine the intimacy of that soft moss warmed by a mother's breath, carrying both scent and safety. Debates continue among textile historians about how early native technologies influenced later European designs. Some point to the adaptation of fur-trimmed hoods and layered mittens by explorers who otherwise would not have survived Arctic expeditions. Others argue that these innovations were borrowed, but never truly understood in spirit. After all, to wear the clothing of survival without the culture of respect behind it is to miss its essence. You sit down beside the women now, your breath mingling with theirs in small clouds. One of them laughs softly as she checks your crude attempt to stitch a strip of hide. She takes it from you and demonstrates, her fingers moving so fast they blur. The needle, made of bone, glides smoothly through the soft leather. It's like watching language in motion, every movement a word you don't yet know. When she finishes, she drapes the piece over your shoulders. The warmth is immediate, comforting. You realize that what you are wearing is more than a garment. It's a continuation of countless winters survived by countless hands. Outside, the wind rises again, sweeping through the clearing. The hides sway gently, catching sunlight on their salted surfaces. The workers keep going, steady and unhurried. There's a rhythm here, a quiet defiance in every stitch. You can almost hear the murmur of ancestors guiding them, reminding them that survival is not a miracle, it is an art. You pull your hood up, the fur brushing your cheeks. The cold no longer feels like an enemy. It feels like a teacher, testing your patience, demanding respect. The garments these people create are lessons written in hide and sinew. Each piece says the same thing. Warmth comes not from fire, but from knowledge, passed hand to hand, thread to thread, generation to generation. As the day fades, the horizon glows faintly pink. The women finish their work and hang the last hides to dry. You watch the smoke rising from nearby dwellings, curling into the evening sky. The cold presses closer again, but you are ready now. Wrapped in warmth shaped by wisdom, you stand quietly in the snow, feeling part of something older than time itself. The night returns, sharp and still. The stars are so bright they seem to crackle in the sky. You breathe out and watch your own cloud of warmth drift upward before vanishing. There is no roaring fire here, no comforting blaze licking at wooden walls. Yet somehow, the camp glows faintly, illuminated by the gentler light of ingenuity. You follow that glow toward a cluster of figures kneeling in the snow, their hands busy with something mysterious. They are arranging stones, smooth and dark, in a shallow pit. The stones have been heated in an outdoor fire earlier, their surfaces now shimmering with trapped heat. When one of the men drops a bit of snow on top, it hisses softly and vanishes into steam. Then, with careful hands, they cover the stones with a layer of bark and dried moss, before sealing it all under a blanket of earth. It looks simple, but you soon feel the warmth spreading from beneath your feet, subtle but steady. It is like standing on a quiet pulse. Accounts from early explorers describe this method vividly. Native communities often relied on thermal storage rather than open flames. Heated rocks, packed into small pits or containers, radiated warmth for hours without producing smoke or sparks that might draw attention or waste fuel. These heat stones were often chosen for their density, usually basalt or granite, gathered from riverbeds. Some tribes even carried favorite stones from camp to camp, considering them part of the family. Imagine that. Warmth given shape, loyalty baked into the heart of a stone. Travel journals mention an odd but clever addition to this practice. Hunters would sometimes wrap stones in animal bladders filled with water to create portable heat packs for long journeys. The warm water stayed liquid for hours, tucked inside fur-lined bags. To modern ears, it sounds like something invented in a laboratory. yet it came from simple observation and need. Survival demanded not comfort but creativity. Archaeological studies have also revealed traces of small oil lamps made from soapstone or clay in areas as far south as New Mexico and as far north as the Arctic Circle. These lamps used animal fat as fuel, and a wick made of twisted moss or bark fibers. The flame burned low and steady, giving off both light and heat while conserving precious resources. You imagine one flickering beside you now, its glow soft as breath, its flame whispering against the darkness. Elders from coastal nations tell stories of nights when the lamps were the only sun they had. The people would gather close, pressing knees and shoulders together, while the small flame painted everyone in gold. Children would drift to sleep to the soft rhythm of crackling fat, a lullaby of warmth that never wasted a spark. There is something deeply intimate about this scene. The entire community cocooned around a single trembling light. Researchers continue to puzzle over how efficiently these early systems worked. Some believe that stone heating and oil lamps were used together, each sustaining the other. Others think the two methods belong to different tribes entirely, shaped by geography and resources. The truth may be impossible to prove, but it hardly matters when you can feel the results even now. Warmth that needs no firewood, light that whispers rather than shouts. In the distance, you see another group working with what looks like animal fat spread over hides. At first, it seems strange until you realize that fat was as valuable as gold during winter. It was food, fuel, polish, and waterproofing all at once. Some communities would coat the insides of their shelters with a thin layer of tallow or seal oil, sealing cracks and adding a faint sheen that reflected lamplight. When the cold became unbearable, they would burn bits of this very fat to keep the air soft and alive. Every part of the hunt became part of survival. A Jesuit missionary once wrote in awe about how native families seemed immune to the freezing nights. He described them sitting calmly, wrapped in furs beside glowing stones, chatting as snow piled high outside. He admitted that he could barely stand it, his fingers stiff, his breath freezing on his beard, while the families around him smiled and offered him tea made from pine needles. He concluded, somewhat humbly, that they have found friendship with the cold where we have only found fear. Modern scientists studying these methods now understand the physics behind them. The principle is thermal mass. Stone and earth absorb and release heat slowly, stabilizing temperature over time. But what the textbooks cannot capture is the human side of it, the ritual of tending warmth, the care in placing every rock, the rhythm of breath shared between people and their tools. You can almost sense that rhythm in your own chest as you stand among them, watching steam rise gently from the snow. Someone nearby begins to sing, a low, repetitive chant. The tone vibrates softly through the air, rising and falling in waves. The sound mingles with the faint hiss of melting snow and the sigh of wind through bare trees. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the warmth from the stones reach your bones. The world narrows to sound, scent, and pulse. This is what comfort looked like before walls and radiators. Not luxury, but harmony. A few children come over, giggling as they press their hands to the warm earth above the stones. One of them traces patterns in the frost with a fingertip, watching it melt into little streams. You find yourself smiling. The warmth feels even stronger now that laughter has joined it. Perhaps that is another secret science of survival joy, as insulation. You notice how deliberate everything is. When the heat begins to fade, someone uncovers the stones, adds new ones from the outdoor fire, and rearranges them in a practiced pattern. Nothing is wasted. Even the ashes from burnt moss are mixed into animal grease to create a kind of sealant used for tools or lamps. Every detail, every gesture loops back into the same circle, conserving life through balance. There's a saying from an old Ojibwe storyteller, "Fire is not the only heat. We learn to make warmth without anger." The meaning becomes clear now. These people mastered the art of gentle energy, small, controlled, enduring. You imagine sleeping beside those glowing stones, the faint heat brushing your skin, the air still and breathable. Outside, the world could freeze solid, but inside this little circle, life hummed on quietly. When you finally sit back, the night feels softer. The stars no longer seem so far away. You realize that fire, as most people imagine it, was never the only answer. True warmth came from 1,000 smaller lights, from stones, from fat, from closeness, from understanding how much is enough. The lesson feels simple, ancient, and profound all at once. You lie down beside the buried heat, close your eyes, and listen to the gentle crack of cooling stone. The earth exhales. The night wraps around you like a blanket. And in that moment, you understand how a people could survive without a single fireplace, by turning the world itself into their hearth. The morning arrives quietly, with light that seems to hesitate before touching the snow. You open your eyes to see frost gathered at the edges of your breath, silver threads weaving across the air. The shelter around you feels small and perfectly still. There is no smoke, no flicker of fire, yet your body is warm. You are wrapped in hides so thick they seem to breathe with you, their faint animal scent mingling with the clean bite of cold air. Someone stirs beside you. A child shifts under a fur blanket, snuggling closer to her mother. You notice how they sleep almost in a spiral, each body curved toward the next. The warmth radiates outward like ripples in a pond. You can hear faint breathing, a slow collective rhythm that fills the room with life. This, you realize, is another secret of winter survival: shared warmth. In the Arctic and northern plains, families often slept together in close circles, pressed beneath layers of caribou or buffalo hide. It was not simply affection, it was physics. Human bodies release heat constantly, and when that warmth is trapped beneath heavy fur, it forms an invisible shield against the cold. Some hunters even traveled with dogs or small animals to add another layer of life's heat. Early ethnographers described scenes where sled dogs and humans lay side by side, the steam from their breaths rising together in perfect unison. There's an old tale told among northern tribes about a man who survived a blizzard only because his dogs refused to leave him. He buried himself beneath their bodies, and by morning they had formed a living wall against the wind. When he woke, he called them his furred brothers. The story feels both tender and practical. Warmth for these people was never solitary. It was communal, almost sacred. Early explorers often struggled to understand this way of living. They wrote in disbelief about families sleeping so close that they could not move without touching. To them, it seemed uncomfortable, primitive even. Yet those same explorers often froze in their separate tents, too proud to huddle together. The difference between pride and survival was sometimes only a few inches of space and a willingness to share breath. Physical anthropologists studying Arctic adaptation have noted that many native communities developed unique sleeping practices to preserve warmth. The sleeping platform, slightly raised from the floor, kept bodies above the cold ground. Beneath it, animal hides or straw absorbed moisture and trapped insulation. The thickest skins were placed on top, forming a canopy that caught body heat and sent it drifting back downward. Some families even lined their bedding with fine moss, which stayed dry and soft even in freezing temperatures. Curiously, some old winter shelters were deliberately built small, not out of lack of resources, but out of wisdom. The smaller the space, the easier it was to heat with only human presence. Warm air stayed close, cycling slowly between sleepers. You might call it the science of intimacy. Every heartbeat mattered, every exhale counted. Written accounts from fur traders mention that the first nights spent in such shelters were difficult for outsiders unused to the closeness, but by the second night, they wrote, something changed. The sound of steady breathing, the comfort of nearby warmth, and the sense of shared safety created a peace deeper than sleep. It was like being inside a single living creature, one journal reads. Every man's warmth became his brother's. Modern physiologists later confirmed what these early peoples already knew. The human body is an efficient heater when used wisely. At rest, a person gives off about 100 watts of heat, enough to warm a small, enclosed space over time. Multiply that by a dozen sleepers, add thick furs and walls of packed snow, and you have a system as effective as any fireplace. Some Arctic oral histories recall the gentle hum of people breathing together through the night, describing it as the song of winter. In that slow rhythm, you can almost hear the world breathing too. There was no need for roaring flames or constant tending. Warmth was alive, shared, and sustained by patience. One particularly intriguing custom comes from accounts of the Innu and other subarctic nations who sometimes slept in shelters lined with pine boughs. The needles released a faint, resinous scent, helping clear the lungs and ward off illness. The floor became not only insulation but medicine, turning each night into a small act of healing. You can almost smell it now, the sharp sweetness of pine mingling with fir and earth. Historians continue to explore how such close sleeping arrangements affected social life. Some argue that this intimacy built strong communal bonds and deep empathy, while others believe it demanded strict social etiquette to balance comfort with personal space. Whatever the case, this closeness was not merely tolerated, it was celebrated as proof of belonging. A curious finding from archaeological digs shows that sleeping areas were often arranged in a specific order, with elders or infants placed near the warmest spots. It was a silent system of care, a nightly redistribution of heat and love. You can imagine the soft shifting in the dark as parents pulled their children closer, or as elders were covered with extra hides before dawn. No one was forgotten in the cold. You shift slightly under your own fur covering and feel that subtle, living heat press closer. The air inside smells faintly of smoke from the lamps outside, mixed with the earthy musk of hides. The rhythm of breathing around you is steady and hypnotic. You could almost fall asleep again right here, lulled by the heartbeat of warmth that moves from one person to the next. Some modern survivalists have tried to replicate these methods, spending nights in snow shelters without fires, relying solely on shared body heat. Many have admitted surprise at how effective it is. The key, they say, is trust. Trusting that closeness is safety, not weakness. The ancients already understood that lesson. You remember something an elder once said in a recorded interview: "The cold only kills the proud. The humble stay warm." Those words linger in your mind as you lie still, feeling the softness of fur against your face. Outside, the wind begins to rise, brushing against the walls of your shelter. Inside, the warmth holds steady, quiet and alive. You close your eyes again, and the world becomes sound and breath. The snow sighs, the air hums, and everybody beside you beats the same rhythm. There are no walls between people here, no distance between lives. Warmth moves like language, like memory, like love. You drift towards sleep knowing that, in this world, survival is a shared dream. Steam rises in the distance, curling into the cold air like ghostly fingers. You walk toward the sound of laughter and the rhythmic splash of water on stone. The snow crunches under your boots, and soon, the sharp bite of winter gives way to a strange, soft heat. The scent of wood smoke, sage, and damp earth drifts through the air. You are standing before a small dome, half buried in snow, built of bent willow poles covered in hides. From within, a glow pulses gently, as if the earth itself were breathing light. This is a sweat lodge, one of the oldest sanctuaries of warmth and spirit. You crouch and step inside, blinking as the heat wraps around you instantly. The air is thick, humid, and fragrant. It feels alive. Around the central pit, stones glow red, their heat radiating like a heartbeat. Water splashes onto them with a hiss, filling the small space with rolling clouds of steam. The darkness thickens and softens all at once. Your skin prickles, your breath shortens, and the cold outside fades into a distant memory. Ethnographic records describe the sweat lodge as more than a bathhouse. It was a ceremony of cleansing, a renewal of both body and spirit. For many native nations, it served the same role that fire did for others: warmth, purification, and connection. Archaeologists have found remnants of such structures across the Great Plains, the Southwest, and the northern forests, their designs remarkably similar despite the distance between them. According to oral teachings, the stones called grandfathers by some tribes carry ancient wisdom. Heated outside in great fires, they are brought in carefully, glowing and crackling, then placed at the center. When water is poured on them, the hiss is said to be the voice of the spirits, releasing the energy stored deep within the earth. The warmth that fills the lodge is not only physical, it is emotional, ancestral, almost sacred. One explorer's diary tells of being invited into such a lodge during a blizzard. He expected misery, but what he found was peace. "It was as if the storm could not find us," he wrote. "The snow struck the hide walls and vanished. Inside, the people sang and laughed, and I sweated as if it were midsummer." He emerged from the experience trembling, not from cold but from awe. Some accounts from early missionaries tried to interpret the ceremony through their own lenses, calling it superstition or magic. Yet modern anthropologists recognize it as a sophisticated form of heat therapy, detoxification, and community bonding. The high humidity increases blood flow, strengthens lungs, and relaxes muscles, exactly what a body battered by months of cold needs. What science later confirmed was already known by instinct. An intriguing note appears in 19th century field journals. Certain tribes adjusted their sweat lodge rituals according to the moon's cycle. On the darkest nights they used fewer stones, allowing the ceremony to last longer and keep the heat low but steady. On full moon nights, more stones were used, symbolizing energy and renewal. It was both spiritual calendar and survival strategy, tuned to the rhythm of nature. Researchers still discuss whether the sweat lodge originated purely as a spiritual practice or developed first as a method for physical warmth and health. Some argue that it began as simple heat therapy and gradually acquired ritual meaning, while others see the two as inseparable from the start. What seems clear is that, in winter, it offered both warmth and hope, two things equally essential to survival. Inside the lodge now, you can barely see through the mist. Someone begins to sing, a low, rhythmic chant that pulses like the beat of a heart. Others join, their voices weaving together until the sound feels like a wave washing over you. You breathe deeply, the hot, damp air filling your lungs. Sweat runs down your skin, mixing with the scent of sage and cedar. The sound of water striking hot stone keeps time like a drumbeat. The ceremony continues in rounds. After each one, the flap opens briefly to let in a rush of icy air. The contrast shocks your body, but it also sharpens your senses. You feel alive, completely present. Outside, the stars glimmer coldly, but inside this dark dome, you are surrounded by life. Steam clings to the walls, trickling down like tiny rivers. You can hear the laughter of the people, the sighs of release, the quiet gratitude that follows every breath. A story is told among certain plains tribes about the first lodge being built by a man who wished to share the warmth of the earth with his people. The spirits gave him the idea to bend willow poles into a dome and cover them with hides, symbolizing the womb of Mother Earth. Inside, the people would return to her care, purified and renewed. Each round of steam was said to mimic the breath of the earth itself. When the people emerged, they were reborn into the cold with hearts warmed anew. What fascinates modern ethnologists is the engineering behind it. The low dome shape retains heat efficiently, while the layered hides keep wind and snow at bay. Even when the outer surface freezes, the air inside stays comfortably warm. The lodge can be built and dismantled quickly, allowing nomadic groups to carry the structure across great distances. Its design is both spiritual and supremely practical, a union of belief and necessity. When the ceremony ends, you step outside, steam rising from your skin into the bitter air. The cold no longer bites, it caresses. Every breath feels cleaner, sharper, easier. Around you, The others stand in silence, faces glistening, eyes closed. The snow sparkles under the moonlight, and for a moment it feels as though the earth itself is exhaling alongside you. In this quiet, you understand that warmth is not always a matter of fire and flame. Sometimes it comes from surrender, from trusting the rhythm of breath, from the act of gathering together and creating heat from within. The sweat lodge was never just about surviving the cold, it was about remembering the body's own light. You linger in the chill air, feeling the contrast between frost and skin, between silence and heartbeat. The cold is still here, yes, but it no longer feels like an enemy. It feels like balance. You smile, close your eyes, and let the last wisp of steam fade into the sky. You wake to a softer morning, though the cold still hums in the air. The world outside is silver and white, the horizon swallowed by fog. The snow crunches under your boots as you follow a faint path leading to the edge of a frozen lake. Around you, the people move quietly, bundled in layers of hide and fur. The camp smells faintly of smoked meat and pine. Someone hums under their breath while tending to small mounds of snow. At first, you think they are just clearing space, but then you realize they are digging into hidden stores. Beneath those mounds lie the secret pantries of the winter world. It surprises you to see how calm they are, how practiced their movements. These people have mastered the art of feeding themselves in a land where nothing grows. They do not need cellars or stone granaries. Their storage is the landscape itself. Every pit, every drift, every shadow has a purpose. According to archaeologists, many native communities created underground caches designed to keep food safe for months, sometimes the entire winter. The permafrost acted like a natural freezer. Hunters stored meat, fat, and berries in deep holes lined with bark or moss. The openings were sealed with stones or packed snow, which kept out air and scavengers. Even in the Arctic, temperatures underground remained consistent, preserving food better than any wooden chest could. Travel accounts from the 1700s describe explorers astonished by these hidden reserves. Some reported that dried salmon, frozen months before, still tasted fresh when thawed beside a lamp. Others noted that roots and berries stored in layers of moss kept their flavor long into spring. The technique required patience and planning, qualities that turned survival into strategy. A curious bit of lore tells of hunters marking their caches not with flags or sticks but with memory alone. They would study the shapes of drifts, the patterns of the wind, and the position of nearby rocks. To outsiders, the snow looked identical everywhere, but to those who belonged here, every contour held meaning. It was like reading a secret language written in white. Some anthropologists have suggested that this kind of spatial memory, knowing the land intimately enough to hide and find food months later, was as valuable as any weapon. It was an invisible map that passed from one generation to the next, drawn in stories and gestures rather than ink. Imagine teaching a child how to find tomorrow's meal not by showing them where it is, but by teaching them how to see. In coastal regions, preservation took another form. Families smoked fish on open racks during the late summer, the air heavy with the scent of cedar and salt. The smoked meat was then stored in seal bladders or baskets coated with fat to keep moisture out. The result was light, oily, and durable, a perfect meal for travel. Archaeological remains of such storage sites, found along the Pacific coast, confirm how meticulous the process was. The combination of salt, smoke, and cold air made these foods nearly immortal. A missionary once wrote about an Inuit family who served him aged walrus meat that had been buried under ice for more than a year. He described it as terribly strong but strangely nourishing. The family laughed at his reaction, explaining that the taste meant it was ready. To them, fermentation was not spoilage but transformation. The cold preserved, but time added flavor and strength. Food historians now understand that these fermentation methods using controlled decay and cold temperatures created probiotics and essential nutrients that sustained people through the darkest months. What seemed primitive to outsiders was actually sophisticated biochemistry. discovered not through books but through centuries of observation. In the woods nearby, you see a woman checking another type of cache. She kneels beside a hollow tree trunk and pulls out bundles of herbs and dried roots wrapped in bark. The air fills with the scent of sage and sweet grass. These were not only for food but for healing. Dried plants, preserved from the brief summer, would be brewed into teas when illness came or the cold grew too heavy to bear. The storage of medicine and food followed the same principle. Take what the earth gives, use only what is needed, and let the rest sleep beneath the snow. Researchers today still discuss whether these storage techniques were developed independently across regions or spread through early trade and migration. Some argue that similar practices in Asia and the Arctic point to ancient shared origins. Others see them as examples of human genius repeating itself wherever the cold demanded creativity. The question remains open, and perhaps it does not need an answer. What matters is that the earth itself was the pantry, and winter, for all its cruelty, became a partner rather than a thief. You crouch beside one of the pits as it is uncovered. Inside lies dried meat wrapped in hide, dusted with frost. The air that rises smells faintly sweet, like aged fat and smoke. Someone slices a piece and offers it to you. The texture is chewy, the flavor deep and earthy. It melts slowly in your mouth, releasing the memory of summer. You can feel the energy spread through your body almost immediately. No fire, no feast, just quiet nourishment earned by patience. Children gather nearby, waiting for small frozen berries to be thawed in warm water. Their laughter fills the air as they taste the first sweetness of the day. You can sense the unspoken rhythm behind it all. Every bite, every handful is measured. They eat slowly, reverently. The food carries not just calories but connection. Each piece represents effort, memory, and respect for the world that sustains them. The wind picks up again, sweeping loose snow across the plain. The people finish their work, covering the caches carefully, as if tucking the earth back to sleep. In spring, these same mounds will soften and melt away, leaving no trace of the treasures beneath. That, perhaps, is the quiet beauty of this way of life. Nothing wasted, nothing permanent, everything in rhythm with the season's breath. As the group walks back to the settlement, the sun rises higher, glinting off the frozen surface of the lake. You glance back once more at the hidden storehouses beneath the snow. They are invisible now, but you know they are there, tiny pockets of warmth and nourishment waiting patiently beneath the cold. You pull your cloak closer, your belly still warm from the meal. The air is crisp, but it carries no threat anymore. The secret to surviving winter, you realize, is not to fight the cold but to work with it, to learn its patterns, to use its stillness as protection. The people here have turned frost into a shield and snow into a promise. You smile, and for a moment, the cold itself feels like an ally. The snow falls so quietly you can hear each flake land. It whispers against your hood, soft and rhythmic, like 1,000 tiny drums. You tilt your head back and watch the sky. The world above you is a grey blur, yet the snow feels alive, purposeful, as though it carries messages you have not yet learned to read. The people around you seem to understand it instinctively. They move slowly, their eyes on the drifts, their steps careful. Here, snow is not just weather, it is language. You walk beside an elder who studies the ground before every step. His face is calm, his eyes half closed as if listening to something beneath the surface. He stoops, touches the snow with his bare hand, then nods. "It will warm by afternoon," he says softly. You look around, confused. The air feels impossibly cold. But a few hours later, the light shifts, and the snow begins to clump heavier, wetter, just as he said. Ethnographers and climatologists studying indigenous life in the northern regions have often marveled at this kind of knowledge. People who lived for generations in the same lands developed a sophisticated understanding of snow, its texture, color, sound, and even scent. There are hundreds of terms across native languages describing different kinds of snow. The soft powder that drifts easily, the crusted layer that holds your weight, the brittle kind that cracks beneath a blade. Each word carries instructions, warnings, and comfort all at once. According to oral teachings from several Arctic and subarctic peoples, reading the snow was as essential as knowing the stars. Snow could tell you when a storm was coming, when ice was safe, or when a hunting path was dangerous. A faint shimmer meant wind-blown snow had hardened into ice, signaling that walking would be treacherous. A dull, flat color hinted at new snow and softer footing. Even the sound of footsteps told a story, sharp squeaks for deep frost, muffled crunches for a coming thaw. A Jesuit explorer once confessed that he felt blind traveling in such conditions. He wrote that the locals could see the weather through the ground, while he stumbled like a child. He watched them test the snow with sticks, feeling for layers hidden beneath. Later, he learned that these layers told of past storms and temperatures, a natural archive of time. Each drift was a page of history written in white. A curious tradition existed among some northern hunters. Before setting out, they would sprinkle fine ash or ground charcoal onto the snow to read the wind's direction. As the particles moved, they could tell which way the air currents flowed. Others would bite a handful of snow, tasting it. Slight variations in flavor, metallic, sweet, bitter, revealed how close they were to salt water or to ice thickened by age. To modern minds, this might sound impossible, but sensory memory was survival's greatest ally. Modern meteorologists have only recently begun to understand the complexity of these practices. Researchers studying indigenous environmental knowledge note that these observations align closely with modern data about snow density, crystal structure, and wind behavior. What took scientists' instruments to measure, these communities learned through centuries of attentive living. Their expertise was not written in books, it was carved into instinct. There is a saying among some Algonquin-speaking peoples: snow speaks softly, but only to those who listen. You think about that as you walk, listening to the crunch beneath your feet. Every step becomes a word. You start to notice the small things, the way light glints differently off the hard crust, how the wind leaves ripples like handwriting across the drifts. Suddenly the white world feels less empty and more alive, full of signs waiting to be read. Another layer of meaning appears in the way people interact with snow beyond reading it. Children learn to shape it into blocks for temporary walls that shield the wind. Hunters pack snow into shoes to stop squeaking sounds that might scare prey. Women scoop clean snow to melt for water, choosing patches untouched by pine needles, knowing that tree snow tastes bitter. These small acts, repeated daily, build a kind of dialogue between human and storm. A French trader once noted that he never saw anyone panic when snow began to fall heavily. Instead, he saw people smiling. To them, fresh snow meant new insulation for their homes, cleaner drinking water, and a sign that the land was still breathing. The trader wrote, almost in wonder, that they treat the storm as a friend coming to visit. Inuit oral stories often describe snow as a spirit, a messenger from the sky who covers the earth so it can rest. The elders say that snow protects what sleeps beneath, seeds, roots, and small creatures. It silences the world, giving both humans and the land a chance to recover. You begin to see it differently now, not as an obstacle, but as a gentle layer of pause over life itself. Some modern historians debate whether such perspective shaped survival behaviors or resulted from them. Did the people adapt spiritually to endure hardship? Or did their beliefs arise naturally from their successful coexistence with the environment? It is a question without a clear answer, perhaps because both ideas are true. Living with snow required both skill and reverence, both precision and poetry. You crouch and scoop a handful of snow, feeling the tiny crystals collapse against your palm. It melts slowly, releasing the faint scent of the air. It came from clean, almost metallic. The elder smiles and says quietly, "This snow is honest. It came in peace." You do not quite know what he means, but somehow you do not need to. The words hang between you like mist. Later that evening, as the sky deepens to violet, the people gather to share food. The air is filled with the gentle hiss of snow sliding off hides and roofs. Someone tells a story about a winter long ago when the snow refused to stop falling for 40 days. They say it buried entire forests and made the world silent as sleep. Yet no one died that year, because everyone understood the snow's moods. They used its weight to strengthen their homes, its stillness to conserve their energy, its reflection to stretch daylight. You lie back after the meal, watching flakes drift down through the starlight. The snow glows faintly blue, alive with its own quiet fire. You listen again to the sound it makes, the faint hiss as it lands. Somewhere in that sound, you begin to hear the truth these people have always known. The cold is not your enemy. The snow is not your foe. They are your teachers, whispering lessons in a language made of silence. You close your eyes and let the flakes settle on your face. The chill is soft, not cruel. The world exhales around you, and for a moment, you understand why they never built walls high enough to shut this out. The snow is not there to be defeated, it is there to be understood. The morning greets you with a pale sun trembling behind a curtain of clouds. The cold is sharp enough to make your teeth ache, yet the camp is already stirring. People move in slow, steady motions, their breath forming soft halos around them. Today is a travel day. The winter roads are ready, carved from frozen rivers and packed trails. The landscape looks endless, but they know the way. You watch as they prepare one of the most ingenious tools ever made for snow, the snowshoe. You pick one up and study it. It is wide and light, woven with rawhide over a wooden frame. It looks delicate, almost fragile, yet when someone straps it on and steps into the snow, they float where you would sink. The design spreads weight evenly across the surface, allowing each step to glide rather than dig. The sound it makes is rhythmic and soft, like a heartbeat in slow motion. Historical accounts from explorers and traders describe snowshoes as a marvel of engineering. Indigenous communities across North America developed them long before Europeans ever set foot here. Each region created a distinct shape to match the land. In the forests of the East, snowshoes were long and narrow, built for winding paths among trees. On the open plains, they were shorter and broader for crossing drifts. In the Arctic, they were curved at the tips to help with deep powder. Every pair carried a signature of its maker, both practical and artistic. Anthropologists have found examples dating back thousands of years, preserved in permafrost, their designs still recognizable today. Some were made from bent ash or birch, their frames steamed and curved to perfection. The lacing, made of animal sinew, was coated in grease to prevent it from freezing. The level of craftsmanship rivals anything from modern gear manufacturing, yet each pair was made by hand, adjusted to the weight, stride, and purpose of its owner. A curious note from an 18th century journal describes how travelers learned to tell snow conditions by the feel under their feet. If the snowshoes squeaked, the air was dry and brittle. If they slid silently, the air held moisture and might soon bring new snow. This constant communication between foot and ground became a language of motion, a conversation carried on in every step. You watch as a young man ties the bindings around his ankles, the rawhide straps snug but flexible. He takes a few steps, then glides smoothly forward, his movements graceful and precise. The others follow, forming a single file across the frozen plain. The sound of their travel is a whisper, a steady rhythm that blends with the sigh of the wind. You follow behind, your own steps uncertain at first, but soon you find the rhythm too. It feels like walking on breath. Some historians believe snowshoe design spread gradually from northern Asia to North America with early migrations. Others argue that native peoples developed their own versions independently, responding to local conditions. Whatever the origin, the refinement that happened here turned necessity into art. European fur traders quickly adopted the technology, often relying on Indigenous guides to make and maintain their snowshoes. Without that help, many would not have survived the first winters. As you move across the landscape, you begin to understand the balance between strength and patience. The snowshoes demand rhythm. Step too quickly, and you stumble. Step too slowly, and you sink. The trick is to glide, to move as if your body were part of the wind. The people around you make it look effortless. Their bodies lean forward slightly, their arms swinging in time, their breaths rising in clouds that drift away behind them. A story told among the Cree speaks of the snow woman who taught humans to walk on her back without hurting her. She gave them the gift of the snowshoe, instructing them to step gently, to move with respect. In return, she promised to carry them wherever they needed to go. To break that rhythm, to stomp or rush, was to offend her. Those who forgot her lesson, the elders say, found themselves lost in storms that never ended. You pause to adjust your bindings and notice the landscape opening before you. The frozen trees shimmer like glass, their branches heavy with frost. Far in the distance, smoke curls upward from another encampment. The trail between villages is long, but the snowshoe makes it possible to travel where wheels and hooves fail. Trade, communication, and friendship continue through the depths of winter because of this quiet invention. An explorer once remarked that snowshoes turned impassable wilderness into a road. He was right. What looked like endless emptiness to outsiders was, in truth, a vast network of living paths. Hunters, messengers, and families moved along these frozen highways with purpose and ease. Some trails followed rivers and lakes, others cut through forests known only to those who had memorized every turn. You hear laughter ahead. Someone is showing a child how to run with snowshoes, holding their hands as they stumble and fall, then rise again. The child's giggles echo through the crisp air, pure and bright. For a moment, it feels like the cold itself is smiling. Ethnographers have observed that this kind of movement, graceful, steady, almost meditative, was not just practical but emotional. It taught patience and focus, qualities deeply respected in native traditions. Traveling across frozen land was not merely about reaching a destination. It was an act of harmony, of learning how to move in step with the world's rhythm. You continue walking until your body warms despite the cold. Your breath steadies, your feet glide. You no longer think about the cold or the distance. You are simply part of the motion, part of the landscape's slow heartbeat. Around you, the others move in quiet unison, their tracks forming long ribbons that vanish behind hills. By midday, you stop near a cluster of trees. The group removes their snowshoes and leans them against the trunks. The air smells of sap and frost. Someone begins to boil water over a small oil lamp, and the steam carries the scent of tea made from spruce tips. You take a sip and feel its warmth bloom inside you. Looking out across the snowfields, you realize that every step you took today was an act of understanding. The snow did not conquer them, nor did they conquer it. Instead, they found a way to dance upon it. You imagine how many journeys, hunts, and reunions depended on these silent shoes. Each track across the snow tells a story of resilience and grace. As the sun dips behind the trees, turning the snow gold and pink, the people rest quietly. The snowshoes lie in neat rows, their shapes casting long shadows. The air hums with stillness, the kind that feels full rather than empty. You take one last deep breath and know, deep down, that what you have witnessed is not just invention. It is poetry written in footsteps across a frozen world. The evening light fades slowly across the plains. The snow glows blue in the shadows, and the air tastes clean, almost metallic. You sit near a small gathering where hunters unpack their bundles. The smell hits you first, rich, fatty, and strangely sweet. They unwrap layers of hide to reveal something dark and dense, cut into thick slabs. It looks simple, but the reverence with which they handle it tells you this is no ordinary food. Someone hands you a piece, and you take a bite. It is chewy, salty, and satisfying beyond measure. This is pemmican, the lifeblood of winter. Food historians describe pemmican as one of the greatest survival foods ever created. It was born out of necessity on the northern plains, where winters lasted too long and food could vanish overnight. Made from dried meat, rendered fat, and sometimes berries, it was dense, portable, and astonishingly nutritious. A handful could sustain a person for an entire day of hard travel. The recipe was so efficient that European traders and explorers adopted it, calling it the miracle ration of the wilderness. To make it, hunters first dried thin strips of buffalo or deer meat over a slow fire until it became brittle. Then, they pounded it into powder using stone mortars. Melted fat was poured over the mixture, binding it into a thick paste. Sometimes they added dried berries for sweetness or flavor. Once cooled, the mixture hardened into blocks that could last for years without spoiling. The secret was balance equal parts, fat and protein, enough energy to outlast even the cruelest storm. A curious note from an early trader's journal tells of a young woman who could judge the quality of pemmican just by smell. She would close her eyes, inhale deeply, and declare whether it would keep or spoil. Her nose, trained through generations of experience, could detect even the slightest impurity in the fat. The trader admitted that his laboratory tests in later years never matched her accuracy. Modern nutritionists now understand why pemmican worked so well. The fat acted as a natural preservative, protecting the meat from bacteria and oxidation. The ratio of nutrients provided steady energy and prevented muscle loss during long periods without fresh food. In many ways, it was the perfect human fuel. Yet what made it special was not only its chemistry but its story. Each batch was made with care, blessed with prayers, and shared among families who knew that every bite carried the warmth of a summer hunt into the heart of winter. There is a quiet moment as you watch them prepare fresh batches beside a low fire. They stir the rendered fat, watching it shimmer like liquid gold. Someone sprinkles in crushed berries that stain the mixture a deep crimson. The scent of smoke and fruit fills the air. You realize that this is not just cooking, it is ritual. Each movement is deliberate, slow, respectful. They are preserving not only food but memory. A traveller from the early 19th century once wrote that he saw pemmican as the embodiment of endurance. He noted that when supplies failed and spirits broke, this humble mixture kept entire expeditions alive. But he also admitted that the taste, strong and oily, was not for the uninitiated. To the people who made it, however, it tasted like survival itself. Ethnobotanists studying the berries used in pemmican found that certain kinds, like chokecherries or cranberries, added more than flavor. Their natural acids helped preserve the fat and prevented sickness. The combination of animal and plant created a balance that mirrored the land itself, a union of strength and renewal. It was both science and art, discovered through long observation rather than experiment. You glance around the circle and see children helping, their hands small but sure. They learn without instruction, mimicking the movements of their elders. The pounding of dried meat echoes rhythmically, blending with the sound of the wind outside. It feels almost like music, a heartbeat carried through generations. There is a story told among the Lakota about the first woman who made pemmican. The legend says she dreamed of a great winter when all game vanished and people began to starve. In her dream, the spirits showed her how to mix the strength of the buffalo with the sweetness of the earth. When she woke, she followed the vision and saved her people. Ever since, pemmican has been considered a gift, a reminder that survival depends not on force but on wisdom. A few researchers have speculated that this kind of preserved food might have allowed nomadic tribes to travel farther and trade more widely than once believed. The ability to carry hundreds of pounds of compact nourishment changed migration patterns and opened vast regions of the continent to exploration. In a way, pemmican was not only sustenance but technology, a tool that reshaped movement and trade. As the evening deepens, the hunters portion out the new batch. They wrap it in hides, pack it into bundles, and tie them with sinew. A few pieces are kept out for immediate eating. One man offers you another bite. The texture is dense but melts slowly, coating your tongue with warmth. You feel it spread through your chest like a small fire. The conversation around the circle turns to memories of past winters, to hunts gone well and hunts gone wrong. Laughter mixes with sighs. Someone mentions how the best pemmican always tastes faintly of smoke from the first fire of the season. Another adds that it tastes different depending on the animal: buffalo for strength, deer for speed, moose for patience. Each flavor carries its own spirit. Modern historians continue to debate who first perfected the recipe. Some claim it originated among the Plains Cree, others among the Métis or Ojibwe. The truth is probably more complicated. Like all great inventions, it may have emerged in many places at once, born from the same urgent need. Yet wherever it began, it became a shared language of survival across cultures. The stars begin to appear, faint and distant. The group finishes packing the food, and the air grows still. The smell of fat and smoke lingers long after the fire has dimmed. You realize that in this frozen world, true comfort is not warmth alone. It is the knowledge that tomorrow's hunger is already answered. You sit back, letting the last bite of pemmican dissolve on your tongue. The taste is wild and honest, full of life that refuses to fade. You imagine travelers hundreds of miles away, unwrapping their own bundles under the same stars, tasting the same strength. It is as if the entire land shares one meal, one pulse of endurance beating through the cold. You close your eyes and listen to the wind. It smells faintly of smoke and tallow, and beneath that, something deeper, the promise that no matter how long winter lasts, someone has already prepared for it. The moon rises bright and slow, reflecting off the snow like a mirror. The camp glows faintly beneath it, a cluster of shapes breathing quietly under fur and hide. You follow the sound of soft voices carried through the still air. It leads you to the center of the settlement, where a small group gathers around a dim lamp. The light flickers, casting gentle shadows on their faces. No one moves much. They simply sit together, wrapped in blankets, eyes half closed. The night belongs to stories. A woman begins to speak, her voice low and calm. The children lean closer, their faces round with attention. Her words seem to move like the wind, slow at first, then rising and falling in rhythm. You cannot understand all the words, but the tone pulls you in. It is the sound of belonging, of memory being handed from one heart to another. Historians who studied winter traditions among Indigenous peoples often described these storytelling nights as the heartbeat of the season. When the land froze and travel stopped, the people turned inward. The body rested, but the mind wandered freely. Around the soft glow of lamps or coals, families told the tales that bound them together: the origins of animals, the creation of the stars, the lessons of survival and kindness. Winter, in many ways, was the classroom of life. An explorer once wrote that he could tell how cold a winter was by how many stories he heard. The colder the night, he said, the longer the stories. It was not an exaggeration. Some tales stretched for hours, interrupted only by laughter, questions, or the crackle of a lamp being refilled. Every pause was filled with silence so deep it became part of the story itself. One particularly beautiful tradition was the story fire, a small, carefully tended light meant only for words, not for warmth. It glowed faintly enough to be safe indoors, but bright enough to paint faces with color. The people said it allowed the spirits of the stories to see who was listening. Children were told never to interrupt a story fire, because the spirits could lose their way if a tale was left unfinished. Anthropologists have found that this ritual storytelling played an important role in preserving both practical knowledge and emotional balance. Through these tales, survival skills passed down as legend. The story of how a hunter read the snow to find his way home became a lesson in observation. A myth about a fox tricking a storm became a guide to patience. The stories blurred the line between education and comfort, between fact and imagination. Curiously, some early traders mentioned that they were forbidden to tell certain stories during the summer. The people said those tales belonged to winter alone, when the world was quiet enough to hear them properly. Telling them in the warm months was said to confuse the spirits. Modern folklorists interpret this as a brilliant social rhythm, a way of matching human activity to the cycles of nature. When the world outside slowed, so did the mind, opening itself to reflection. A researcher once described how the cadence of these stories affected the body. The slow rhythm of speech, the soft tone, and the dim light all worked together to lower heart rates and ease breathing. It was a form of communal meditation long before such words existed. You can feel that effect now as you listen. Your body begins to relax, your eyelids heavy. The woman's voice continues, now describing the first fire that came to the people. She says it was not stolen from the sky or gifted by a god. It was born from friction, from two sticks rubbed together in darkness. The people learned that warmth comes not from force but from persistence. You picture the scene vividly. Two small hands, two patient sparks, a tiny light blooming in endless night. The story's lesson is clear without being spoken. Someone else joins in, an elder whose voice trembles slightly with age. He begins another tale, one that makes the younger listeners grin. It is a humorous story about a foolish hunter who thought he could outsmart the winter by building a fire so big it scared away the snow itself. But in the end, the heat melted the ice beneath him, and he fell into a freezing pond. The laughter that follows is soft but genuine, the kind that warms the chest more than any flame. Ethnographers have noted that humor was vital in long winters. Laughter released tension, kept minds light, and turned fear into something manageable. The cold could kill, but so could despair. A good story kept the darkness from creeping too close. It reminded people that the world, even at its hardest, was still full of wonder and absurdity. In one corner, a boy is fighting sleep. His mother pulls him close, wrapping him tighter in a blanket. The storyteller notices and lowers her voice, her words slowing until they sound like waves against the shore. The boy's eyelids flutter once, twice, then close. The fire flickers. The world narrows to warmth and breath. Some modern psychologists, studying similar oral traditions, have remarked that such storytelling rituals may have acted as a form of nightly therapy, aligning emotion and rest. The human body responds naturally to cadence and repetition. The slow unfolding of a tale helps listeners drift toward calmness. Without knowing it, the storytellers had perfected the art of peaceful sleep. The woman finishes her story and lets the silence settle. No one rushes to speak. The quiet feels full, not empty. Outside, the wind moans softly through the trees, and the snow reflects the moonlight in pale blue waves. Someone hums a low tune, a song without words. It carries the same rhythm as the story's slow, even eternal. You sit there, eyes half closed, letting the sound wash over you. The lamp flickers and throws your shadow against the wall, long and wavering. For a moment, you feel part of something ancient and endless. This, you realize, is what kept people alive as much as food or shelter, the act of remembering together. When you finally step outside, the air is cold enough to make your breath sting, yet you are warm inside, not just from the hides on your back, but from the voices still echoing in your ears. The moon hangs above, calm and round, like a watchful eye. The snow sparkles faintly beneath it, and the camp falls back into silence. You crawl into your bedding, listening to the faint laughter still drifting from another lodge. The stories will continue until the last voice fades, and when it does, dreams will take over where words left off. You close your eyes, and for a moment, the darkness feels alive with all the stories ever told. The next morning greets you with air so still it feels like glass. The lake nearby has frozen into a perfect mirror, stretching endlessly toward the horizon. You walk carefully toward it, hearing the soft groan of ice beneath your feet. The people of the camp are already there, scattered across the surface, moving with quiet purpose. You see tools in their hands, bone-tipped spears, carved hooks, and small wooden spools wound with sinew cord. you realize you are about to witness another of their winter miracles fishing through the ice. At first, it seems impossible. How can life exist beneath something so solid and cold? Yet the people know the rhythm of this frozen world intimately. They know that beneath the thick ice, the water is still moving, still alive. They choose their spot carefully, reading the surface as if it were a map. One man taps it with a stick and listens. Another sprinkles snow over it, watching how the wind moves. Finally, they nod, certain of what lies below. Archaeological evidence found near old fishing sites shows that native peoples across North America had perfected ice fishing long before Europeans learned the technique. They carved holes using stone or antler chisels, often in places where underwater springs kept the ice thinner. Into these holes they lowered lines, tipped with bone or copper hooks, baited with small bits of dried fish or shell. Some even used small decoy carvings, shaped like fish, to attract their prey. The method was patient, almost meditative. One early explorer recorded his astonishment after being invited to such a fishing expedition. He wrote that the men sat for hours in total silence, faces calm, eyes fixed on the water. When a shadow moved below, their hands flicked with lightning precision. He described it as a hunt of patience, not of chase. In that patience lay the secret of survival. A curious tradition among the Cree involved the making of listening sticks. These were long, flat rods placed against the ice to feel the vibrations of fish moving beneath. The technique seems almost magical, yet scientists today confirm that sound travels quickly through ice and can be felt as subtle tremors. What appeared to outsiders as intuition was, in fact, a delicate science of touch and sound. Ethnographers have found that this activity was never merely about food. It was also spiritual. Before cutting the first hole, many communities offered tobacco or whispered prayers to the water, thanking it for the life it would provide. The ice was treated not as a barrier, but as a veil between worlds. To pierce it was to enter into a conversation with what lay beneath. Researchers still debate whether these rituals served primarily as acts of faith or as practical ways to maintain harmony with fragile ecosystems. Some argue that constant gratitude discouraged overfishing and preserved balance. Others see them as purely ceremonial. Whatever the case, they created a relationship with the land that was both respectful and sustainable. You watch now as one of the fishermen kneels by his hole, his hands steady on the line. His eyes are half closed, his breathing slow. The wind has dropped, and the silence feels absolute. Then, without warning, he pulls sharply. A flash of silver breaks the surface. A fish, gleaming and alive, thrashes in the cold air. He lifts it gently, murmuring something you cannot catch, then strikes it once to still it. The others murmur approval, a sound of satisfaction rather than excitement. They move efficiently. The fish are cleaned immediately, the entrails buried in snow far from the camp to keep predators away. Some are hung from wooden racks to freeze solid, their bodies becoming natural storage. Others are wrapped in hide and carried back to the shelter. Nothing is wasted, not even the bones, which will later become needles, tools, or charms. A French trader once wrote of watching women preserve fish by dipping them into brine made from melted snow mixed with ashes. The alkaline balance prevented freezing too quickly, allowing the fish to dry evenly in the frigid air. He confessed that he had never tasted anything like it, describing the flavor as the winter's own salt. Such ingenuity was born not of abundance, but of attention. Modern ecologists studying ice fishing among traditional northern peoples note how sustainable the practice was. By fishing through small holes, only certain sizes and species could be caught. The rest remained safe beneath the ice, ensuring the waters were never stripped bare. The method that fed them also protected their future. The air around you begins to hum softly as more lines are dropped into the holes. The fishermen sit quietly, their silhouettes motionless against the white horizon. Above, the sun is low, glowing pale gold through the mist. You realize this is not just survival but an art form, an act of deep patience that few in the modern world ever experience. Someone nearby tells a story about a hunter who once fell through the ice and was rescued by a giant fish that carried him to the shore. The fish, they say, spoke in a human voice and asked only one favor, that the people never take more than they need. It is a myth, perhaps, but also a promise, and you can feel its truth in the stillness around you. As the day fades, the fishermen rise slowly, packing their tools. They cover each hole carefully with snow, as though closing a door. The surface of the lake returns to its perfect stillness. The faint smell of fish lingers in the air, mingled with wood smoke drifting from the camp. You walk back with them, your stomach already imagining the taste of the catch sizzling on a flat stone beside the lamps. The warmth of the shelter greets you when you return. The air inside smells of oil and fat, the faint sweetness of cooking fish. People sit in small groups, sharing the meal. The conversation is soft, filled with gratitude and contentment. Someone hums a tune that mimics the sound of water under ice, a gentle reminder of the world that still moves beneath the frozen silence. As you eat, you realize that this way of life turns every act, hunting, cooking, even waiting, into a dialogue with nature. The cold is no longer the enemy. It is simply another voice in that conversation. You finish your meal and sit quietly for a while, listening to the wind brushing against the hide walls. The lake outside glitters faintly in the moonlight, hiding its secrets once more beneath the ice. You close your eyes, your hands still smelling faintly of salt and smoke. The quiet hum of the camp feels like the pulse of the earth itself. Somewhere beneath the ice, fish drift through black water, carrying on their slow, silent dance. You think of them as you drift towards sleep, floating in your own dark ocean of warmth and breath. Morning arrives like a sigh, pale and soft, with frost glittering on every branch. The air smells faintly of pine and smoke, a comforting reminder that life persists even when the world looks frozen still. You step outside the lodge and stretch, feeling the stiffness in your limbs from another long night in the cold. Around you, the camp is quiet. Only a few figures move between the shelters, carrying bundles of twigs and small pots. They are not preparing food this time. They are gathering medicine. In the heart of winter, when the ground sleeps under layers of ice, medicine must be remembered rather than picked. The people know exactly where the healing plants hide. Some are stored carefully from autumn, dried and wrapped in bark. Others are found even now, hidden beneath snow or inside tree bark. You follow an older woman as she walks toward the forest's edge, her feet sure on the frozen ground. She stops by a birch tree, presses her hand against its trunk, and listens for a moment. Then she smiles, scraping a thin strip of bark into a pouch. Ethnobotanists studying indigenous winter practices have long been astonished by this deep knowledge of the land. Many native nations understood that trees and roots held power even when the rest of the forest seemed lifeless. Birch bark was prized for its antiseptic oils. Willow bark was steeped in water to ease pain and fever. Cedar needles were boiled to make tea rich in vitamin C, a defense against scurvy long before anyone knew what the word meant. Every scent, every taste, carried a secret of survival. A Jesuit chronicler in the 17th century once confessed that he owed his life to such knowledge. He fell ill during a long winter journey, weak with fever, until his native companions brewed him a bitter drink from pine needles and spruce tips. Within days, he recovered. He wrote that it tasted like the forest itself had decided to breathe for me. He did not understand how it worked, but modern chemistry later revealed the truth. Those green needles were rich in ascorbic acid. Science only caught up centuries later. You kneel beside the woman as she moves to another tree. She points to a dark, knotted fungus growing from the bark. It looks strange, almost burned, but she treats it with care. Later you learn it is chaga, a mushroom prized by northern peoples for its healing properties. Ground into powder and steeped in hot water, it becomes a dark tea that strengthens the body during long winters. Recent studies confirm what they already knew. It contains antioxidants and anti-inflammatory compounds. For them, it was both medicine and ritual. something that restored the body and the spirit together. There is another curious custom you notice. Before taking anything from the forest, she pauses and whispers a few words. You do not understand the language, but the tone is one of thanks. Then she leaves a pinch of dried berries at the base of the tree. It is an offering, small but meaningful. Later, an elder explains that it reminds both the gatherer and the plant that their exchange must stay balanced. Take only what is needed, and give something back in return. Scholars still discuss how these rituals fit within indigenous medical practice. Some see them as purely spiritual, while others argue that gratitude itself has a measurable psychological effect, reinforcing mindfulness and care. Whatever the explanation, the results are undeniable. These people survived centuries of bitter cold without pharmacies or hospitals because their pharmacy was the forest. You walk deeper among the trees, the snow muffling your steps. The sunlight filters through the branches, scattering in silver specks. Every few minutes, the woman stops to collect something new: dried cattail fluff for bandages, spruce resin for wounds, roots that look ordinary but smell sharp and clean when cut. Each item has a story. She tells you that cattail down was used to cushion broken bones, and that resin sealed cuts faster than anything else. You realize that this knowledge, stored in memory rather than paper, is as vital as any fire. An early traveler once remarked that he saw no need for medicine among the people of the north, because they do not fall sick as we do. Of course, then he was wrong. They fell ill, like all humans, but their methods of healing were intertwined with their way of life. Illness was not something to be fought, but something to be guided back into balance. Healing meant restoring harmony between body, spirit, and season. In one account from the plains, women prepared a winter tonic by boiling bear fat with small branches of sage and pine. The result was rubbed on the skin to keep it supple and to ward off frostbite. Modern dermatologists, perhaps unknowingly, rediscovered the same principle in moisturizing ointments centuries later. Nature had already written the formula. The woman beside you begins to hum softly as she works. Her voice carries a vibration that seems to merge with the sound of the wind. She explains that certain songs are sung only while gathering medicines, to remind the plants of their purpose. It is a kind of communication, a promise of partnership. You feel something shift inside you as you listen, a quiet awe at how seamlessly knowledge and reverence fit together. By the time you return to camp, her pouch is full. Inside are treasures of survival: bark, roots, needles, and resin. She empties them onto a hide, sorting them carefully. Some will be boiled into teas, others crushed into salves or smoked for purification. The air soon fills with the mingled scents of earth and sap. Children wander close, curious, and she lets them smell each herb in turn. This, you realize, is how the knowledge lives on through touch, scent, and repetition, not through written words. Researchers who have worked closely with indigenous healers describe this kind of transmission as embodied learning. It is not just taught but felt, remembered in the muscles and senses. You cannot separate the knowledge from the experience of gathering it. Even centuries later, the method still works because it was built on observation, respect, and intimacy with the land. As evening falls, a few of the herbs are brewed into tea. The liquid turns a golden green, steaming gently in the cool air. You take a sip. It tastes sharp at first, then soothing. The warmth spreads through your chest and settles there, calm and steady. The woman smiles knowingly, her eyes bright in the firelight. "The trees never sleep," she says quietly. "They just speak slower in the winter." You sit beside her for a long time, listening to the soft crackle of resin on the coals. Outside, the forest breathes, and the snow glows faintly in the moonlight. You understand now that medicine is not only in what heals the body, but also in the act of listening to the earth, to the silence, to the rhythm of survival itself. The world is white and endless again, a frozen silence that swallows every sound. Yet beneath this stillness, something stirs not in the snow, but in the minds of the people who live within it. You feel it too, that awareness of the unseen forces that breathe through winter. The air carries stories here, invisible but alive. The people around you do not speak of the cold as mere weather. They speak of it as a being with moods, rules, and spirit. Tonight, you are invited to learn how they give meaning to the most dangerous season of all. You sit among them as twilight fades. The sky burns briefly red before sinking into blue. An elder begins to speak, his voice slow, the kind that makes you lean closer without realizing it. He talks about the spirit of frost, the one who walks softly across the land and paints each tree with his touch. He says that if you hear the trees cracking at night, it is the frost spirit testing their strength. He tells this not to frighten, but to remind everyone that nature must always be respected. Ethnographers who have listened to such tales note how spiritual explanations of winter served both as comfort and education. Instead of fearing the unknown, people gave it names and faces. The cold became a teacher, the wind a messenger, the snow a quiet friend. These personifications transformed suffering into conversation. They turned survival into a relationship rather than a struggle. An explorer once recorded that his hosts, deep in the northern forests, would never whistle at night in winter. They believed it invited the cold spirits closer, who might take offense or curiosity in human warmth. Instead, they sang softly, their songs rising and falling like the wind itself. The explorer found it eerie, but he admitted that the nights felt less lonely when they sang. A curious legend from the Iroquois tells of a being called the Old White Woman of the North, who ruled the snow and ice but could be softened by laughter. In her loneliness, she froze everything she touched, until one clever boy told her jokes that made her laugh so hard she forgot her magic for a season. When spring came, the people said it was because laughter had melted her heart. The lesson was simple but profound. Joy could be stronger than cold. Modern scholars sometimes debate whether such myths were purely metaphorical or rooted in deeper environmental observation. Some argue they helped encode knowledge about the seasons, like the timing of thaws or migration patterns. Others see them as emotional maps, guiding communities through fear and hardship. Either way, these stories became invisible threads that tied hearts to the land. You notice how the younger listeners sit quietly, eyes wide, their small hands clutching furs. For them, these spirits are real, part of everyday life. The frost spirit watches but also protects. The wind warns of storms. The aurora borealis dances across the night sky as the ancestors' fires. Even the silence of snow holds meaning. It is not emptiness but presence. Anthropologists have found that winter myths often carry practical lessons hidden beneath their poetry. A story about a woman punished for sleeping too close to the edge of camp teaches safety from predators. A tale about hunters who mocked the wind becomes a warning about arrogance toward nature. Every spirit has its shadow and its wisdom. An old traveler once wrote that the people he stayed with feared no god of the cold, but treated it like a neighbor whose moods they understood. They spoke kindly to the air, greeted the sunrise with breathless gratitude, and accepted the dark months as part of life's balance. He confessed that, after months among them, he too began to talk to the snow as if it could hear him. In the firelight, another story begins. This one speaks of a woman who followed the voice of the snow into the mountains. She was gone for 3 days and returned with a face glowing like ice in sunlight. She told her people that she had met the spirit of winter, who had shown her how to keep the cold at bay. She taught them to line their shelters with moss, to hang hides against the wind, to store warmth inside rather than chasing it with fire. Her wisdom became custom, and the people lived through the longest winters. There are faint echoes of shamanic tradition in these stories. Anthropologists who studied Arctic and subarctic cultures note that spiritual visions often coincided with moments of environmental insight. Dreams told people where the caribou would move, or when the ice would break, blending the mystical and the practical into one truth. In that sense, spirituality was not an escape from reality but a deeper way of seeing it. The elder speaking now stirs the coals before him. Sparks rise like tiny stars. He looks up at you and says, "Cold is not evil. It just wants to be respected." His eyes glint in the firelight, steady and calm. You nod, understanding what he means even without sharing his language. The frost spirit, the wind, the darkness, these are not enemies. They are reminders that life is precious because it can end. Some modern thinkers draw parallels between these winter beliefs and early forms of environmental ethics. To view nature as alive and aware creates a sense of responsibility. If every gust of wind or fall of snow carries intention, then waste and greed become not only impractical but disrespectful. The result is a harmony born not of fear, but of mutual recognition. The storytelling ends, but no one moves to sleep yet. The silence afterward feels sacred, as if the air itself is listening. Outside, the wind sighs softly against the walls of the lodge. The sound could be a spirit passing, or simply snow falling from a branch. You realize that it does not matter which it is. What matters is that the people here notice it. They give it meaning, and in return, it gives them strength. You lie back on your bedding, eyes half open, watching the last flicker of light fade into the darkness. The stories still echo in your mind, weaving together fear, wisdom, and comfort. You think of how different this understanding of winter feels, neither a curse nor an enemy, but a vast, breathing presence that keeps the world in balance. Outside, the wind hums low, carrying the rhythm of ancient voices. You close your eyes and listen, wondering if perhaps the frost spirit is out there after all, walking softly among the sleeping world, checking to see who still remembers how to listen. The air is sharp and full of light when you wake. The horizon glows faintly pink, and the snow sparkles like powdered glass. Somewhere nearby, dogs begin to bark, their voices rising and falling in joyful chaos. You step outside and see them tethered near a line of sleds, tails wagging, tongues lolling. Their breath rises in clouds. They look both wild and affectionate, creatures of the cold who belong here completely. The people around you move easily among them, speaking in short, rhythmic tones. Today is a travel day across the frozen land, and the dogs are not just animals. They are partners, engines of survival, and companions of warmth. The sleds are elegant and simple. Long wooden runners curve upward at the front like frozen waves. The frame is lashed with rawhide cords, light enough to lift but strong enough to carry hundreds of pounds. Furs, tools, and food bundles are already packed neatly. One man kneels to check the traces, murmuring softly to his lead dog. The animal watches him closely, ears twitching, eyes bright with understanding. There is affection in the moment, the kind of mutual trust that forms only through years of shared hardship. Historians who have studied these winter traditions often point out that dog sleds were more than a mode of transport. They were lifelines connecting distant camps. Before the arrival of horses or snow machines, dogs carried trade goods, messages, and even the sick across miles of frozen tundra. Archaeological remains of sled runners found in Alaska and northern Canada date back thousands of years, evidence of an innovation as vital as the bow or the canoe. A curious record from an early European explorer tells of his surprise when he realized that sled dogs were not treated as tools but as kin. Families spoke to them, sang to them, and even fed them pieces of their own food. In many stories, dogs appear as messengers between humans and the spirit world. Among the Cree, a tale tells of a dog that carried the first flame of life through a snowstorm, bringing warmth back to humankind. The bond was practical, emotional, and sacred all at once. Ethnographers note that sleeping beside dogs was another ancient strategy against the cold. In the long, bitter nights, families sometimes allowed the animals to curl around them, their thick coats radiating heat like living blankets. The phrase, three-dog night, still used today to describe bitter cold, comes from this very practice. The dogs gave not only labor and protection, but also warmth and comfort when the fire burned low. Modern researchers continue to study how these partnerships evolved, Some argue that early domesticated dogs in North America were specifically bred for endurance and temperament rather than size. Others believe that a mix of natural adaptation and selective care created animals uniquely suited to harsh climates. Whatever the origin, the relationship between human and dog in these frozen lands became one of profound interdependence. You watch as the team prepares to depart. The leader gives a soft whistle, and the dogs instantly lean into their harnesses. The sled creaks, the runners glide forward, and soon the motion becomes smooth and effortless. You step onto another sled, clutching the frame. The wind bites your cheeks, but the exhilaration outweighs the sting. The landscape blurs around you, open fields of white dark lines of distant forest, the faint shimmer of ice crystals drifting in sunlight. The lead dog moves with purpose, tail high. Each dog knows its place in the team, the leaders to guide, the swing dogs to steady turns, the wheel dogs to power through deep snow. The sled follows a rhythm older than memory, each paw and runner synchronized like the beating of a drum. The only sounds are breathing, wind, and the faint jingle of metal rings. An old journal written by a trader recounts how these dogs seemed to sense danger long before their human companions. They would stop suddenly on the ice, refusing to move. Moments later, the ice might crack or the wind shift, warning of a storm. Some said they could smell change in the air, others that they felt vibrations through their paws. Whatever the reason, ignoring them was foolish. The dogs were the land's eyes and ears. You stop with the group at midday. The dogs are fed first. Each receives a chunk of frozen fish or dried meat, devoured in seconds. The humans eat afterward, sipping broth from wooden bowls. There is no hierarchy of importance, only balance. The warmth shared between species is as natural as breath. A woman sitting beside you tells a story about a time when the dogs saved an entire village. The hunters had gone too far and were trapped by a sudden storm. The dogs, sensing their path home, turned against the wind and found their way back through blinding snow. They dragged their masters safely into camp, their fur coated in ice. When they collapsed, the people covered them with furs, feeding them bits of tallow until they stirred again. To this day, she says, the spirits of those dogs guard travelers in storms. Modern sled racing still honors that ancient heroism. Historians link the endurance of these animals to centuries of careful breeding and mutual respect. Even in contemporary Arctic communities, the old bond remains unbroken. Technology has changed, but the spirit of partnership endures. As the journey continues, you notice how much communication happens without words. A tilt of the musher's head, a shift of tone, a short whistle, all instantly understood. The dogs respond not with fear, but with eagerness. They seem to love the rhythm of motion, the endless horizon ahead. Perhaps that is their joy, the same wild beauty that drives people to explore and survive. When the sun begins to sink, the sleds stop beside a line of trees. The camp forms quickly, practiced and calm. The dogs are unhitched, fed again, and allowed to rest in shallow pits dug into the snow. They curl into perfect circles, their tails covering their noses. A soft snoring hum fills the air, a lullaby of trust. You realize that, for these people, survival is not lonely. They live surrounded by breathing warmth, by hearts that beat for them in both gratitude and companionship. You lie down that night beside the sled, the air still humming with the day's rhythm. Somewhere in the distance, a dog howls softly, answered by another and another, until the sound spreads across the frozen world like a thread of song. It is not mournful, it is steady, ancient, proud. You close your eyes and listen, realizing that this is the voice of endurance, the echo of lives moving together through ice and silence, never truly alone. The next morning dawns pale and silent, the kind of silence that feels endless. The air has turned colder overnight, brittle as glass. The sled dogs stir in their shallow nests, shaking frost from their fur. You walk toward the center of the camp, where a group of people are preparing bundles wrapped in fur and hide. The scent of smoked meat and tallow fills the air. They are getting ready to trade, and for a moment, you sense that warmth in winter depends not only on fire or fur, but on connection. Trade is as old as survival. In the deep, cold months, when hunting slows and travel grows risky, trade becomes lifeblood. You watch as the bundles are opened. Gleaming animal pelts, strings of beads, small stone blades, dried berries, and carved tools. Each item carries a season's worth of labor and skill. Nothing here is excess. Everything is useful. Archaeological studies across the continent show that ancient trade networks once stretched for thousands of miles, linking tribes from the Arctic Circle to the Great Plains and beyond. Shells from coastal regions have been found buried alongside bones of buffalo far inland. Copper from Lake Superior has been discovered in the far west. The cold did not isolate these people. It connected them, creating long paths of exchange that carried warmth in the form of goods, ideas, and friendship. A traveller's diary from the early 18th century describes a winter gathering at a frozen riverbank. He saw hundreds of people arriving on snowshoes and sleds, their breath forming clouds in the morning air. They brought pelts, baskets, furs, and stories. He wrote that the sound of trade was not shouting or haggling, but laughter and song. They barter like dancers, he said, moving with rhythm and trust. In one corner of the camp, you see two women spreading out hides that shimmer faintly in the weak sunlight. They are soft and perfectly tanned, the result of weeks of careful work. Another group examines carved ornaments made from antler and shell. The traders touch each item gently, running their fingers along the edges, nodding in appreciation. It feels less like buying and selling, and more like a ritual of respect. Some historians suggest that this form of winter trade helped communities survive, not only by sharing goods, but by renewing alliances. When storms could cut off one group for months, friendship meant survival. These gatherings were as much about trust as about tools. Every exchange carried a silent promise. If one camp falters, the others will help. An elder nearby explains to you that warmth comes in many forms. A fire lasts a night, he says quietly, but a friend lasts through the storm. You feel the truth of it settle deep inside. Records from early French traders tell of how they learned to rely completely on native exchange systems. Without indigenous networks, their fur expeditions would have ended in hunger and frostbite. They borrowed not only routes and sled designs, but the spirit of generosity that guided them. The traders wrote of being astonished when a family shared food with them even though supplies were low. They did not realize that sharing was not an act of charity but a law of balance. In some regions, trade took on ritual meaning. Among the plains peoples, winter trading fairs often included gift-giving ceremonies where the wealthiest hunters deliberately gave away their best goods to ensure the community's balance. It was believed that generosity kept misfortune away. Anthropologists now see these acts as early social safety nets, systems that distributed resources without formal rules. You can sense how such wisdom made survival possible in a world where one bad season could mean disaster. A curious custom recorded in the northwest coast region describes traders warming their goods before exchange. They would hold furs or tools near the fire or under their cloaks to wake the spirit of warmth within them, ensuring that what was given carried good energy. It sounds symbolic, yet the act feels practical too, warming what will soon protect someone else from the cold. Historians still discuss how these early trade routes functioned in such harsh conditions. Some believe they followed frozen rivers that served as natural highways, while others argue they relied on memory and landmark navigation. What is certain is that the cold itself shaped the system. Winter's stillness made travel smoother, ice turning rivers into roads and snow covering obstacles. What froze for some became a bridge for others. You watch as the traders finish their exchanges. A young man receives a necklace of tiny shells in return for 2 beaver pelts. He holds it gently, as if it were fragile, and ties it around his wrist for luck. Another woman smiles, as she unwraps a bundle of dried herbs traded from far away. The air fills with voices, laughter, and the faint music of wind chimes made from bone and antler. It is a small celebration of survival, a reminder that cooperation is the truest kind of heat. Later, when the sun begins to fall, the visitors prepare to leave. They hug one another, pressing foreheads together in farewell. Sleds are packed again, dogs eager to run. You help tie one of the bundles and notice how the rope is knotted in a specific pattern, a method passed down for generations, designed to hold firm against snow and movement. Every gesture here is a piece of inherited wisdom. As the traders depart, the camp feels lighter, yet somehow fuller. The goods they brought will feed, clothe, and comfort others far away. The stories they shared will travel too, carried like sparks across the frozen world. You stand still for a long moment, watching the sleds disappear into the distance. The horizon glows orange as the sun sinks, and the snow catches the light, turning briefly to gold. In the fading warmth, you realize that survival in this world is not about enduring alone. It is about being part of a web that stretches farther than the eye can see, a web of trust, generosity, and quiet gratitude. The wind picks up again, but it feels softer now. You turn toward the camp, your arms full of traded food, your heart full of something deeper. Winter is still fierce, but it is not unkind when faced together. The world around you has quieted again, but the air feels alive with a strange tension. The sky is a dull grey, the kind of colour that hides both snow and time. You walk toward the frozen river that curves past the edge of the camp. Its surface gleams like steel beneath a thin layer of frost. You stop to listen. There is no sound except a faint creak deep below, as if the river itself is dreaming under its icy skin. This river, they tell you, is both road and prison. In winter, when the surface hardens, it becomes the lifeline that connects distant lands. Hunters travel its length to reach new camps. Traders cross it carrying furs and food. But when the thaw comes, the same river can swallow sleds, homes, even people whole. The ice gives and takes as it pleases. Archaeological records reveal that ancient winter settlements often grew along riverbanks for exactly this reason. Waterways were the original highways of the continent. When frozen, they offered smooth travel for sleds. When open, they carried canoes. In some regions, families built their winter homes beside smaller streams to ensure access to both water and transportation. The rivers dictated rhythm, determining when to move and when to stay still. A curious detail from early explorers' journals describes how travelers listened to the river to predict its mood. They would press their ears to the ice and wait for the sounds within. A deep hum meant the ice was thick and strong. A hollow crackle suggested danger. Some elders could tell, just by sound, when the river would begin to break apart. Their knowledge came not from measuring, but from memory years of listening and surviving. You kneel and touch the ice now. Your fingers numb almost instantly. Beneath the surface, you see faint ripples of movement, dark water shifting in slow silence. It feels alive, patient, waiting. The cold bites your skin, but you leave your hand there anyway, sensing the quiet power beneath. Ethnographers studying northern river cultures often speak of the respect people held for these frozen waterways. They were treated as living beings, capable of kindness and vengeance. Before crossing, travelers might whisper greetings or sprinkle a few drops of fat onto the ice as an offering. The gesture was both gratitude and caution, a reminder that every step across was borrowed permission. One winter legend from the Yukon tells of a young hunter who mocked the river, calling it lazy for sleeping under snow. The next day, the ice cracked beneath him, swallowing his sled and dogs. The people said the river had taken him as a lesson for those who forget humility. It was not superstition, but memory disguised as myth, a warning wrapped in story, ensuring that each generation stepped lightly. Historians continue to discuss how such stories shaped practical survival. Some believe that spiritual respect reinforced safety behaviors, like testing ice thickness or avoiding crossings after sudden temperature changes. Others argue that these tales reflected an emotional truth, that survival in a place so vast required both caution and reverence. You find yourself agreeing with both. You walk along the frozen bank, hearing the faint groans of the river shifting under pressure. The sound is hauntingly beautiful, like the voice of a giant far away. Each crack echoes through the valley, sharp and quick, then fades into stillness. The air smells faintly of wet stone and pine resin. You feel both fear and awe, a mixture that seems to define life here. A French trader once wrote that he could always find his way home in winter by following rivers. They are the only roads that never lie, he said. Yet he also noted that crossing them was the most dangerous act of the season. Too early in the freeze and the ice was thin, too late in spring, and it broke without warning. The people who lived here understood these moods intimately. They could read the river's surface like others read the sky. A detail often overlooked by outsiders is how these frozen rivers became gathering places even in the coldest months. Families would meet on the ice to share news, repair tools, or fish through small holes cut into the surface. The solid river became both bridge and floor, turning the harsh landscape into a social space. It was, for a brief time, a place of life rather than danger. Modern hydrologists studying ancient ice layers now confirm what the old stories already knew. Rivers freeze differently every year, depending on wind, snowfall, and temperature. Some patterns repeat over decades, others shift unpredictably. The people's survival depended on this constant awareness. They were not predicting the future, they were remembering patterns hidden in sound and texture. You stop at a bend where the river narrows. The ice here is crystal clear, revealing stones trapped just below the surface. A man kneels beside you and points. "That one sings," he says quietly. He takes a small stick and taps the ice. A clear, ringing note rises into the air, fading slowly. "That means it sleeps peacefully," he adds. You listen again, enchanted. The sound is almost like music. As the sun dips lower, the river begins to glow with the reflected light of the sky. Pink and gold ripple faintly across its frozen skin. The people call this hour the river's breath, when the ice warms just enough to stretch before night closes in again. For a few moments, it seems to pulse gently under your feet, alive and aware. A researcher once wrote that the relationship between humans and their frozen rivers might be the earliest example of what we now call environmental empathy, the ability to see natural forces not as objects but as companions. You can feel that truth now. Standing here, you sense no separation between the ice and the people who depend on it. Both endure, both adapt, both listen. The light fades, and the cold sharpens once more. You turn back toward camp, walking along the frozen trail that gleams like silver under the dusk. Behind you, the river groans again, deep and slow, a reminder that it is always awake, even beneath the snow. You glance back one last time. The surface has already begun to frost over your footprints, erasing them gently. By the time you return, the stars have appeared. Someone hands you a bowl of warm broth, and the steam curls up toward the night. You sip it slowly, your body thawing while your mind lingers on the sound of the river. Its voice still echoes in your chest, steady, timeless, and endlessly patient. The air the next morning feels lighter, as if the world has exhaled. Frost still clings to the edges of your cloak, sparkling like small stars. You walk through the camp and notice people preparing for travel again. Today they move not to trade or hunt, but simply to explore, to check their traps and paths. You glance down and notice their feet, wrapped in soft, thick moccasins. They move easily, almost silently, even across ice and snow. You try to follow, and your heavy boots make an awkward crunch that feels loud against the quiet. You crouch beside one of the elders who is relacing his footwear. His hands move with practiced grace as he tightens a thin sinew cord across the top. The moccasins are made of deerskin, double-soled and lined with fur. He smiles when he catches you watching and gestures for you to feel them. They are surprisingly light and warm, the texture supple but strong. You begin to understand why they are perfect for winter travel. Archaeologists have uncovered moccasins preserved in ice, some thousands of years old. Even after centuries, the design remains instantly recognizable. The seams are placed on top to avoid wearing through the soles, and the inner layer is stuffed with dried grass or moss for insulation. Each region had its own style, from the beaded patterns of the plains to the wraparound soft boots of the Arctic. What never changed was the understanding that warmth begins from the ground up. A French trader once remarked that his feet never truly felt warm until he copied the design he saw among the Cree. His leather boots froze stiff, while moccasins stayed flexible. The difference was in the material, tanned hides that could breathe, preventing sweat from freezing. The design did not just trap warmth. It managed moisture, something modern engineers still struggle to perfect. One particularly clever technique used by the northern peoples involved wearing two layers. The inner pair was made from rabbit or beaver fur, the outer from moose hide. Between them, fine grass was packed loosely to absorb dampness. Each evening, the grass was removed and dried near a lamp before being replaced. The routine took only a few minutes but kept feet dry even at 40 degrees below freezing. Ethnographers studying early footwear note that these moccasins were more than practical. They were works of art. The stitching was precise, often decorated with quills or beads that carried meaning. A traveler could identify a person's tribe, family, or even personal story by the patterns on their shoes. Flowers might represent lineage. Geometric shapes could mark achievements or visions. Beauty and utility walked together in every step. A curious story from the subarctic tells of a woman who dreamed of a spirit deer that taught her to make winter moccasins. In her dream, the deer told her to use its own hide so that her people could walk quietly through the forest. When she awoke, she followed the instructions and found that her steps left no sound in the snow. Since then, moccasins have been considered gifts of both skill and humility, allowing humans to move through nature without disturbing it. Historians continue to discuss whether the techniques of soft-soled footwear influenced later Arctic boot designs or developed independently. Some believe that the flow of trade and intermarriage between nations blended the traditions, while others argue that the similarities arose naturally from shared conditions. What cannot be debated is their success. The design has endured across continents and centuries with almost no need for change. You stand and try walking in a borrowed pair. The snow beneath your feet feels different now, less harsh, more alive. You can sense the texture of the ground, the faint give of ice and powder. The sound of your steps becomes nearly silent, absorbed by the softness of the hide. The elder beside you nods approvingly. "Now you are walking properly," he says with a quiet grin. A fascinating note from an early ethnographic report mentions that many hunters treated their moccasins as companions. Before leaving for a journey, they would rub them gently with fat or smoke them over cedar to bless them with endurance. Some even whispered short prayers of thanks before putting them on, as if acknowledging that every step forward depended on this humble creation. Researchers studying insulation efficiency later found that the structure of layered moccasins rivals that of modern synthetic boots. The combination of air pockets, natural oils, and flexible materials creates an adaptive warmth that adjusts to movement. In a way, these shoes learned from the feet they protected. You walk beside the others as they check their traps along the frozen riverbank. The air is crisp, filled with the scent of snow and pine. Each person moves differently but with equal ease, gliding over surfaces that would exhaust anyone else. The moccasins grip lightly without slipping, the fur edges catching bits of frost that glitter in the sunlight. It feels less like walking and more like floating between worlds. At one point, the group pauses to rest. You notice the hunters taking off their moccasins and turning them upside down near the fire. Steam rises as moisture escapes. They talk quietly while working, repairing small tears, tightening seams. Every stitch is deliberate. You realize that this care is not vanity, it is survival. In this place, a single tear left unattended could mean frostbite or worse. An old tale shared around the fire tells of a woman who saved her family by sewing through the night. Their shoes had worn thin, and the cold had begun to bite. She stitched until her fingers bled, then warmed the new moccasins under her body before placing them on her children's feet. When morning came, they could walk again. The story is told not for pity but for pride, a reminder that skill and love keep people alive. Modern historians often call clothing a reflection of culture, but here it feels like something more intimate. These shoes are not just objects. They are memories, hands, and hearts made visible. Every pair carries the imprint of the maker's care and the wearer's journey. You feel it in every step. As the day fades, you return to camp with the group. The fire crackles softly, sending sparks into the night. The moccasins are lined up neatly near the entrance, steaming faintly in the warmth. They look like small resting animals, content after a long journey. You sit beside them, watching the snow fall outside, and think about how much wisdom is hidden in simple things. The cold presses gently at the walls, but your feet are warm, wrapped in deerskin, protected by patience and tradition. You take a deep breath and smile, realizing that warmth, once again, is not just something you find, it is something you make, one careful stitch at a time. The sky that morning is a pale grey, the color of old silver. The air bites but carries a hint of softness that suggests the storm has passed. You hear laughter before you even open your eyes, high and bright, cutting through the cold like birdsong. When you step outside, the source becomes clear. The children are awake. They run through the snowdrifts in layers of fur and hide, their cheeks red, their hair frosted with tiny crystals. For a moment, the bleak winter landscape transforms into a playground of light and motion. You stand still and watch, amazed by their energy. They roll in the snow, chasing one another, sliding down small hills, throwing handfuls of powder into the air so it rains down in sparkling clouds. Their laughter echoes against the frozen trees. It feels impossible that such joy could exist in a place so harsh. Yet here it thrives. The adults nearby smile as they work, their faces soft with quiet amusement. Ethnographers who studied winter life in northern camps often remarked on this same phenomenon, that children were rarely still, even in the deepest cold. Their play was not just amusement, but preparation. Every game, every challenge taught them something useful. Snowball fights trained their aim. Sliding and running on ice improved balance and endurance. Even the way they learned to build miniature shelters mirrored the construction of real lodges. Play was the first school of survival. A traveler's diary from the early 19th century describes watching Inuit children build tiny igloos with remarkable accuracy. Using scraps of snow blocks, they shaped and stacked them into perfect domes, copying their parents' work. Inside, they placed carved figures made from bone or ivory, creating whole imaginary families. When asked why they played that way, one boy answered simply, "So I will know how when it matters." The idea that learning could happen through play fascinated early observers. Modern psychologists now agree that the instinct was exactly right. Through repetition and imagination, children internalized complex skills long before they had to use them. The games of winter were lessons written in laughter. You walk closer and see a group of children sliding across the ice on flat pieces of bone tied to their feet. They balance with small sticks, pushing themselves forward. It looks like a primitive version of skating, and you later learn that such play was common across many northern cultures. The bones came from caribou or seal, their smooth surfaces gliding perfectly on frozen lakes. What began as play became practice for traveling over long distances when grown. Nearby, a young girl is sculpting figures from snow, shaping them into animals. A bear, a fox, a bird mid-flight. Her hands are quick and sure. One of the elders kneels beside her, pointing out details: the curve of a wing, the placement of paws. The lesson is gentle, wrapped in affection. You realize that even art here is a kind of memory, a way to hold on to the world during months when the real animals have vanished into hibernation or migration. In one corner of the camp, a group of children gathers around a woman who is telling a story. She gestures with her hands, mimicking the sway of trees and the flight of birds. The children respond in unison, filling in familiar lines. Storytelling and play flow together seamlessly, keeping minds sharp and spirits bright. These are the earliest seeds of identity, planted in frozen soil. A curious note from an early missionary recounts his confusion when he tried to teach arithmetic to native children during winter. They smiled politely, then demonstrated their own version of counting using sticks, snowballs, and footprints. Each object represented a number, and by the end, they had solved the same problems without writing a single symbol. What he dismissed as play was in fact an education shaped by nature itself. Historians have suggested that such childhood resilience contributed greatly to the endurance of entire communities. Children learned early not to fear the cold, but to understand it. They played with snow as if befriending it, turning an enemy into a toy. When they grew older, the lessons remained in their bodies: how to move lightly, how to fall safely, how to find warmth in motion. You notice now that some of the games carry elements of ceremony. The children take turns running to a post and back, shouting the names of ancestors with each lap. The adults cheer softly, clapping in rhythm. The game, you are told, honors the spirits who endured before them. Every sprint through the snow is both exercise and prayer. A fascinating observation made by anthropologists is that these winter games were interwoven with moral teaching. If a child hoarded snowballs or pushed another too hard, the group would gently remind them of balance and fairness. Cooperation mattered more than victory. The lessons learned in play became the values that guided adult life: patience, teamwork, and quiet pride. You smile as one small boy stumbles into a drift and disappears completely. A moment later, he pops up, laughing so hard his voice echoes through the trees. His friends help brush the snow from his fur coat, and soon they are all tumbling together again. It feels like the purest expression of warmth, a kind that has nothing to do with fire or shelter. As the day fades, the children begin to slow. Their laughter softens into quiet chatter. The adults call them back, wrapping them in heavier cloaks. Someone hands out small pieces of frozen berries mixed with tallow, a winter treat that glistens like jewels in the fading light. You watch as they eat, cheeks glowing, eyes bright with satisfaction. A French trader once wrote that he had never seen people face winter with such contentment. Their children laugh in the snow as ours weep beside the hearth, he observed. He did not mean it as judgment but as wonder. In these communities, joy was not something postponed until spring, it was part of the cold, a light glowing from within. Night falls gently, and the camp grows quiet again. The sky deepens to indigo, scattered with stars. You see a faint shimmer of aurora on the horizon, pale green and alive. The children, already half asleep, murmur softly about spirits dancing. You look up and think perhaps they are right. You return to your shelter, the sound of laughter still echoing faintly in your ears. The cold outside feels softer now, tempered by the memory of play. As you settle under your furs, you realize that even the harshest season has its moments of innocence. In the heart of the storm, children have found their own fire, and it burns bright enough to warm the whole world. The storm has passed. Morning light filters through a thin curtain of snow still drifting lazily from the trees. The air feels calm, nearly motionless, as if the whole world has paused to breathe. You sit up inside your shelter and listen. There are no axes striking, no dogs barking, no urgent footsteps outside. Only quiet. It is a different kind of day, one that seems to stretch endlessly, unhurried and patient. Outside, the people are gathered near the central fire pit. The flames are low, more for light than heat. A few figures mend harnesses, others carve small tools, but most simply sit. They speak in low voices or not at all. You sense that this stillness is deliberate, a rhythm built into the long winters. It is not laziness. It is survival through patience. Historians who have written about northern life describe winter as a time of enforced reflection. When the hunts ended and the rivers froze, there was little to do but wait. Yet in this waiting, entire worlds of creativity unfolded. Clothing was repaired, weapons were sharpened, stories were told, and the mind was allowed to rest. The cold outside demanded that people turn inward, both physically and spiritually. A traveller from the 17th century wrote that he was baffled by how content the families seemed during months of isolation. They do not mark the passing of days, he said, but rather the passing of quiet. What he mistook for idleness was a cultivated peace. The people had learned that rest was not weakness, it was a form of strength. You watch as one woman sits by the light, scraping a bone needle against a stone to sharpen it. The motion is small and rhythmic, hypnotic in its repetition. Another woman threads sinew through beads of shell, repairing a necklace. The soft click of each bead is like a metronome. A man nearby polishes the shaft of a spear, his movements slow and sure. No one rushes. There is no concept of wasted time, only preparation. Archaeologists studying ancient winter camps have found that many contained more art and craft objects than summer settlements. During the long cold months, people turned their attention to what their hands could make. Intricate carvings, tools decorated with tiny designs, and garments embroidered with stories all trace back to these quiet seasons. Beauty became a way of waiting. An anthropologist once observed that patience was the defining skill of winter survival. The hunter who acted too soon risked wasting energy, while the one who waited for the right moment lived. This principle extended beyond hunting. Children were taught patience from the beginning, to wait for the fire to catch, to wait for the fish to bite, to wait for the thaw. In the stillness, they learned rhythm, humility, and endurance. You remember a story an elder told one evening about a man who grew tired of waiting for spring. He set out across the frozen plains too early, eager to see green land again. The ice beneath him cracked, and the wind swallowed him in white. When the snow melted, the people found his walking stick standing upright in the thawing ground, as if planted there by the wind. The elder had smiled when telling it. "The earth rewards those who match her pace," he had said. Modern psychologists who have studied traditional northern societies note that this winter rhythm may have preserved mental health as much as physical. The acceptance of stillness reduced anxiety. Instead of fighting the long nights, people made peace with them. In the dim light, surrounded by family and routine, the mind quieted. The cold outside could rage as it pleased. Inside, the human heart stayed calm. You watch as a man shapes a small figure from antler. His hands are steady, his expression serene. When he finishes, he places the carving beside a row of others. Animals, birds, human faces. They sit on the edge of the hearth, catching the flickering glow. Each piece carries a different emotion, a fragment of story made visible. This is how the people fill the endless days, not by racing through them, but by filling each moment with quiet purpose. A curious record from early traders describes their confusion at this unhurried way of life. They measured progress by speed, while their hosts measured it by harmony. One trader wrote, half in awe, that they waste no time because they never feel that time is running away. The phrase stayed with you, echoing through your thoughts now. Perhaps that is the greatest secret of surviving long winters, to make peace with time itself. The day continues with the same tranquil rhythm. Children help their parents untangle cords, patch clothing, and polish tools. The fire burns low but steady. From outside comes the occasional creak of ice expanding in the river, and the far-off cry of a raven. Everything feels suspended in an eternal pause, the kind that lets both body and soul recover. Ethnographers call this period of rest the wintering of the spirit. It is not laziness but alignment, a seasonal meditation written into daily life. The people understood what modern societies often forget, that constant motion exhausts, while stillness renews. Waiting is not empty. It is the space where strength gathers quietly. As dusk arrives, the camp glows faintly. the air inside the shelters heavy with warmth and scent of tallow smoke. Someone begins to hum softly, and others join in, voices blending into a slow, wordless tune. It feels like the heartbeat of the earth itself, unhurried and infinite. You close your eyes and breathe in time with it. Outside, the snow begins to fall again, soft and steady. The flakes drift down like ash from a sleeping fire. You imagine each one as a small whisper, a reminder to slow down, to breathe, to exist without rushing. Inside, the people sit together in silence, the kind of silence that feels full rather than empty. The night lengthens, but no one minds. They have learned that peace lives in patience, and warmth is found in stillness. The next morning breaks cold but dazzlingly bright. Sunlight bounces off the frozen ground until it feels as if the air itself glows. The stillness of yesterday has been replaced by quiet motion. You step outside to find hunters preparing to leave, wrapping cords and tightening packs. They move with deliberate care, their breath pluming in clouds that vanish into the light. A few elders stand watching from the edge of camp, their eyes fixed on the horizon. It looks like any other day, yet you sense something different in the air. This journey will depend not on sight but on communication beyond words. The hunters will travel far, through open plains where landmarks vanish under snow and sky become one. To find their way home, they rely on signs invisible to most. You notice small carvings of wood tied near the shelters, each marked with faint patterns. They are signals, reminders of direction and distance. You follow one man who carries a bundle of split sticks with tiny notches along their sides. Before he leaves, he plants one firmly in the snow and points to it. "For those who follow," he says quietly. Anthropologists studying early northern navigation systems often marvel at these methods. Long before maps were drawn, indigenous hunters developed complex systems of communication using smoke, snow markings, and sound. Smoke trails could rise for miles, their color and rhythm sending specific messages. 3 puffs might mean safe passage. 2 slow trails might signal return. When smoke was impossible, they left carved sticks or bent twigs to point towards safety. A French explorer once described seeing such signs scattered across a frozen valley. He assumed they were random until his guide explained each one like reading a book. A curved branch meant the ice ahead was weak. A triangle of sticks indicated a recent hunt. An upright post marked a safe resting site. What looked like wilderness to outsiders was in fact covered with quiet writing. In some regions, communication carried by sound was even more remarkable. Hunters would mimic bird calls to signal direction or danger. A low, rhythmic hoot told of open water nearby, while a high whistle signaled that someone had found a trail. On still nights, these sounds carried for miles across snow. Ethnographers call it acoustic mapping, but to the people, it was simply listening to the land and letting it answer. A curious account from a missionary mentions that he once followed a guide through a blizzard. The snow erased every trace of their path, yet the guide never hesitated. When asked how he knew the way, the man replied that he could feel the direction by the taste of the wind. The missionary dismissed it as superstition, but modern meteorologists now know that wind often carries subtle differences in scent and temperature depending on direction. The guide's skill was not mystical but trained attention honed through generations. Historians continue to discuss how communication in the cold shaped social bonds among these communities. Some believe that the necessity of subtle signals encouraged cooperation and trust. A missed message could mean disaster, so clarity mattered more than pride. In winter, language itself became an act of survival. You walk with the hunters for a while, watching them move in a loose line. Every few minutes one raises an arm or makes a small gesture, relaying information silently. You start to recognize patterns. A flat palm means stop. A slow circular motion tells others to spread out. When one points toward the horizon, the others glance up at the sun's faint halo, using it to judge direction. Even without speaking, they move like parts of one living organism, connected by attention and instinct. Some anthropologists have compared this coordination to music, with each gesture and sound forming a kind of rhythm. The snow crunches in unison beneath their feet, breath clouds rising together. You realize that survival in this world depends on harmony more than strength. The cold leaves no room for ego. A traveler's note from the 19th century describes how people communicated across vast snowy expanses using reflected light. They would angle small pieces of mica or polished bone to catch the sun, sending flashes that traveled for miles. A single glint could mean, "We are safe," or "The trail is clear." The system was so precise that traders later adopted it for long-distance signaling. What modern armies called heliographs existed here centuries earlier, crafted from stone and patience. As the group reaches higher ground, one of the men stops and kneels. He carves a quick symbol into the snow, 3 lines joined at the center like a star. When he rises, the mark glows faintly in the sun. He tells you it will guide the others back if they become separated. The snow will hold the message for a few hours before the wind erases it. Temporary, yes, but long enough to save lives. Modern researchers studying communication across extreme environments often refer to this as ephemeral technology tools that leave no trace once their purpose ends. These people mastered it without words, writing messages in snow and smoke, trusting memory and weather to carry them. Their inventions disappeared with the wind, yet they worked perfectly while they lasted. You pause on a ridge and look back toward the camp. Thin wisps of smoke rise straight into the sky, fading into the bright air. It looks like stillness, but now you know that each trail speaks. It is not just a sign of warmth. It is language carried on the wind. Somewhere far away, another camp might be watching, reading the message that all is well. The hunters begin their descent toward the frozen valley. The dogs pull quietly, the sleds gliding over the smooth snow. Ahead, the lead man lifts his arm and waves once, a small motion against the endless white. The others respond with the same gesture. You find yourself doing it too, caught in the rhythm of this silent conversation. When evening comes, the campfire smoke curls upward again, this time thicker and darker. The signal has changed. The hunters have returned safely. You watch as figures appear out of the dusk, sleds heavy with game and tools. No words are exchanged at first, only nods, glances, and quiet smiles. Everyone understands. You sit beside the fire later, watching sparks drift into the night. You realize that in this frozen world, communication was never about volume but about awareness. Every gesture, every breath, every column of smoke carried meaning. Warmth was shared not only through heat but through understanding. As you close your eyes, you can still see the thin lines of smoke against the sky, the bright flash of light on mica, the quiet carvings melting into the snow. The messages vanish, but their purpose remains: to connect, to guide, to remind. In the silence of winter, even a whisper can become a bridge across the frozen earth. The dawn begins with a faint blue glow over the treetops. The wind has settled, leaving behind a world so still that even your breath sounds loud. The people move quietly through the camp, each task performed with calm precision. Today, they are preparing the lamps. You notice small stone bowls lined up beside the fire, their surfaces darkened with soot and oil. Beside them are wicks made from twisted moss and cottony fibers. These lamps are the guardians of light, the gentle fires that make winter nights bearable. You kneel beside one of the elders as she works. Her hands are steady, her expression serene. She scoops soft seal fat into the lamp, shaping it carefully, then presses the wick along one side. The smell of the oil is sharp at first, but when she lights it, the flame burns clear and calm, throwing a golden circle onto the wall. It feels almost alive. The air warms instantly. You realize that this is not a mere light. It is the heart of the home. Archaeologists have uncovered stone oil lamps in ancient northern dwellings dating back thousands of years, their designs astonishingly similar to those used today. They were made from soapstone, smooth and heavy enough to retain heat. The fuel came from animals that thrived in the cold: seals, whales, caribou, each drop of oil representing both sustenance and survival. One lamp could burn all night, heating the air and providing light for work and conversation. An explorer from the 19th century once wrote that the glow of these lamps was unlike any fire he had ever seen. "It is not fierce," he said. "It breathes like a living thing, warm and watchful." He noticed that people treated the flame with quiet reverence. Before extinguishing it, they would whisper a word of thanks or feed it a pinch of fat. The act was both practical and sacred, a reminder that life depended on the generosity of what had been hunted. Ethnographers studying these lamps later realized how central they were to winter life. They were cooking stoves, heaters, and altars all at once. Families gathered around them for warmth and stories, measuring time by how long a flame lasted. A small adjustment to the wick could change everything: the brightness of the room, the temperature, even the mood. A curious note in one missionary's journal tells of a household where the flame was never allowed to die. The women took turns tending it day and night. When asked why, they said that darkness invited loneliness, and light reminded the spirits that humans were still awake. Modern scholars see this as both symbolism and science. Constant low light reduced strain on the eyes and helped maintain stable indoor temperatures. Tradition and practicality were one and the same. You watch as several women trim the wicks with bone tools, adjusting the flames until they burn evenly. The light dances gently on their faces. Children sit nearby, carving toys in the soft glow, while men repair tools. The sound of the lamps is almost imperceptible, a faint hiss like a sigh. The air smells of oil and smoke, comforting in its familiarity. In the Arctic, the oil lamp called the quillic was often shaped in a half-moon form, symbolizing the sky. Some were passed down for generations, each one carrying the soot of countless winters. Anthropologists who have held these artifacts describe feeling a strange warmth, even after centuries of stillness, as if the stone remembers the fire. A legend from the far north tells of the first lamp being given to humankind by the moon spirit. In the story, darkness covered the world until a woman climbed to the sky and caught a piece of moonlight in her hands. When she returned, she placed it inside a bowl of oil, and the first flame was born. Since then, every time a lamp is lit, the people say the moon looks down to see its reflection on Earth. Historians continue to debate whether this myth developed from practical observation or spiritual imagination. Some suggest that the lamp's crescent shape inspired the lunar connection, while others think it emerged as an expression of gratitude for light in endless night. Whatever its origin, the belief gave the act of tending flame a beauty beyond necessity. You sit watching the flickering light until your eyes blur slightly. The lamp burns quietly, but its warmth spreads through the room in a way no open fire could. The hides overhead trap the heat, and the stone beneath your hands feels alive with gentle warmth. You think about how many centuries of hands have performed this same ritual, repeating motions so simple and yet so vital. A French trader once recorded that, after months in the north, he began to feel affection for the lamps themselves. He wrote that they seemed to think as they burned, their small flames shifting in rhythm with the breath of the people around them. He might have been poetic, but as you sit here now, you understand what he meant. The flame responds to movement, to voices, to drafts of air. It is part of the family. The practical design of the lamps has fascinated modern engineers. The broad surface allows maximum light with minimal smoke, while the curved lip prevents spillage even when the stone warms. The efficiency rivals modern camping stoves, yet it was achieved through intuition and experience, not measurement. What others invented through trial and error, these people perfected through generations of living in harmony with their environment. When evening comes, the lamps multiply. Every shelter glows with soft golden light, turning the frozen landscape into a constellation of warmth. You step outside and see the small flames flickering through translucent hide walls, scattered like stars across the snow. The air is still, but the scent of oil and smoke drifts gently, a quiet perfume of survival. Someone nearby begins to sing, a low melody that moves in time with the light. The words are ancient, a song of gratitude for the spirits of oil, flame, and stone. It is slow, soothing, and full of grace. You close your eyes and listen, the warmth of the lamp still on your skin. As night deepens, the wind returns, brushing against the shelters. The lamps remain steady, their glow unwavering. In the darkest season, this is how people survive, not by chasing the sun, but by making their own. You feel the quiet pride in that thought, the soft courage that burns within every small flame. You lie down near the lamp, watching it breathe beside you. Its light flickers gently, tracing slow shadows on the walls. The warmth hums in your chest, calm and steady. You realize that you are not simply surviving the cold, you are living within it, held by light that has traveled from one generation's hands to the next. The wind has softened overnight, and the snow outside lies smooth and untouched. You open your eyes to the faint glow of morning seeping through the hides above you. The lamp beside the sleeping place still burns, its flame small but steady. Someone has tended it through the night, feeding it a thin curl of oil so that the room never slipped into darkness. When you step outside, the air stings your face, but it feels clean and alive. The world smells faintly of pine, frost, and distant smoke. You hear voices near the edge of the forest. A group of people stands beside a line of traps half buried in snow. They move quietly, checking each one with care. It is not just hunting that keeps them alive through winter, it is the rhythm of trapping, a dance of patience and understanding between human and animal. You walk closer and see the intricate work of their hands, snares made from twisted sinew, deadfall traps balanced with perfect precision, footprints leading in and out of the trees like stories written in powder. Historians often describe how winter trapping shaped entire patterns of life for native communities across the northern forests. While hunting required movement and strength, trapping demanded observation, respect, and restraint. Traps were set not in anger but in partnership, placed carefully along known paths of hare, fox, or marten. The goal was balance, not conquest. One elder once told an anthropologist, "You never take from the woods more than the woods can sing back to life." A French fur trader recorded that his indigenous guides taught him to read the forest differently in winter. They showed him how the faintest bend in a branch, or a single hair caught on bark, revealed an animal's path. The trader confessed that he could walk through the same place 10 times and never see what they saw. Their eyes were trained not just to look, but to notice. The art of patience turned into survival. A curious detail preserved in oral stories tells of how people learned from the animals themselves. Foxes were said to create their own snow traps, using their weight to break through crusted layers where prey hid. Hunters watched and adapted, crafting snares that mimicked nature's own designs. In this world, the difference between survival and loss often depended on observation rather than invention. Archaeologists have found remains of ancient traplines stretching for miles, each set at precise distances. Some were shared among families, passed down like inheritance. The traps were checked in silence, each catch accepted with gratitude. When animals were taken, a small offering, often a feather, bead, or bit of food was left behind. The act was not superstition but acknowledgement, a reminder that life was an exchange, not a right. Ethnographers studying northern hunting cultures note that trapping also shaped spiritual beliefs. Certain animals, especially foxes and wolves, were seen as teachers rather than mere prey. Their tracks were studied as sacred writing, carrying lessons about balance and endurance. To follow them carelessly was considered disrespectful. Even in hunger, restraint defined morality. One winter story tells of a boy who set traps without ceremony, mocking the rules of his elders. He caught many animals at first, but then the forest went silent. No tracks appeared, no birds sang. He grew hungry and frightened, and when he finally prayed to the spirits for forgiveness, he was told to scatter the last of his food on the snow. The next morning, the tracks returned. The lesson was clear. The forest feeds only those who listen. Modern biologists now recognize how sustainable these traditional methods were. By rotating trap lines, limiting catches, and respecting breeding cycles, communities maintained animal populations for centuries without depletion. The knowledge embedded in myth turned out to be ecological wisdom in disguise. You watch as the trappers lift a small snowshoe hare from a looped cord. The creature is handled gently, its body still warm. They murmur words you cannot understand, but recognize as thanks. The air feels hushed, almost reverent. One man smooths the snow afterward, erasing the signs of struggle. The balance of taking and giving is maintained. A researcher once wrote that the act of erasing footprints was symbolic. It reminded the hunter to leave the world as he found it. The snow was a mirror, reflecting both presence and absence. To walk lightly upon it was to honor all that lived within its silence. As the trappers continue, you notice how their tools are made from what the forest provides: bent willow branches, sinew cords, bits of stone and bone. Nothing gleams, nothing wastes. The technology is invisible, hidden in simplicity. A trap that works perfectly leaves almost no trace, like a thought whispered to the wind. An old man nearby gestures for you to follow him to a deeper part of the forest. He shows you a tree with its bark peeled away in thin strips. He explains that this tree, once cut, will draw animals to its scent. He touches the trunk and whispers a few words, a small prayer for forgiveness. You watch in silence, feeling a weight in the air that is not sadness but respect. Some scholars have debated whether such rituals were literal acts of faith or expressions of ecological awareness. Perhaps they were both. In a world where every mistake could mean hunger, reverence became a form of science. Gratitude kept the balance steady. By midday, the traps are checked and reset. The people return to camp with small bundles of fur and meat. The hides will later become gloves, moccasins, or blankets. The bones will be shaped into needles and tools. Nothing will be wasted. The air fills with the scent of roasting meat, sharp and sweet. Children help scrape hides clean, laughing as they work. Even this chore becomes an act of care. A passage in an explorer's journal tells of being astonished at the quiet cheerfulness of these scenes. They treat the taking of life as one treats the tending of a garden, he wrote. There is no triumph, only gratitude. You see now what he meant. As evening falls, the trappers sit together near the lamp's glow, hands busy with small repairs. One man sharpens a knife, another oils a cord. Their movements are unhurried, confident, sure. You realize that survival here is not a battle against nature but a conversation with it. Each day's work is a sentence in that dialogue, written in tracks and snow, spoken softly through breath and patience. You sit quietly beside them, feeling the warmth of the lamp on your face. Outside, the forest breathes in long, slow sighs. Somewhere in the distance, a fox calls, its cry sharp and echoing through the night. It sounds less like hunger and more like acknowledgement, a reminder that in this frozen world, all things live in balance, even when the balance is cold. The wind rises again that night, low and steady like a deep breath from the earth. It moans through the gaps in the hides, brushing the edges of your blankets. You wake to the sound of voices, not afraid but purposeful. The hunters are already outside, tightening lines and checking shelters. The cold has changed its tone. The storm is coming. When you step into the open, the sky looks heavy, swollen with snow. The air feels electric, carrying the scent of something wild. The people move quickly now. Sleds are pulled closer to the center of camp. The lamps are trimmed, the entrances sealed tighter. Children help pile snow against the lower walls, packing it firm to keep out wind. Everything is done with practiced calm. This is not panic. This is preparation. Historians who studied the survival of indigenous communities through severe winter storms often wrote of their astonishing readiness. Without weather instruments or forecasts, they read the air itself. The sharpness of the wind, the way smoke rose or flattened, the distant sound of trees cracking, these were their warnings. When the land spoke, they listened. A 17th century fur trader recorded that his guides could predict a blizzard hours before the first snowflake fell. "They taste the wind and know," he wrote. He laughed at it once, until he ignored their warning and lost his tent to the storm. The people had been right. They almost always were. You feel the change even now. The world seems to hold its breath. The last bit of sunlight fades behind grey clouds, and a hush falls across the plain. Then it begins snow sweeping sideways, fine and blinding. The air turns to mist and motion. The noise of it fills your ears, endless and soft at the same time. The people move into their shelters quickly. Inside, the light of the lamps glows golden against the hide walls. The storm outside roars like the sea. You hear snow hitting the roof in thick waves, each gust heavier than the last. It feels as if the entire world is shaking, but inside, everyone remains calm. They have done this before. An explorer once described the experience of sitting through such a storm with an indigenous family. He said the snow piled so high that the daylight vanished completely. The shelter became a cave of silence, and yet the air inside stayed warm. When he asked how it was possible, his hosts smiled. "The snow helps," they said. "It wants to keep us safe." The snow that killed the unprepared now became insulation for those who understood it. Ethnographers studying traditional architecture later confirmed that packed snow absorbs sound and retains heat better than many modern materials. The design of the shelters curved, layered, and low distributed pressure evenly, allowing them to withstand the storm's weight. It was both engineering and intuition, shaped by centuries of memory. Inside the lodge, life continues in rhythm with the wind. A woman hums softly as she stirs a pot of broth. The scent of meat fills the air, rich and comforting. Children whisper, giggling quietly at some private joke. Someone sharpens a blade, the slow scrape of stone blending with the sound of snow above. It feels like being inside the heartbeat of the earth. A curious tale told by the Cree says that storms are the breath of an old giant who walks the sky, shaking his furs to scatter snow. When he grows weary, the wind stops. The people tell this story not in fear, but as a reminder that storms always end. Every blizzard, no matter how fierce, eventually runs out of breath. Modern climatologists have noted that understanding snow movement, sound, and pressure could predict collapses and drifts long before instruments existed. What they discovered with science, these people already knew by intuition. Knowledge was passed not in numbers, but in stories that guided action. When the wind speaks from two directions, stay where you are. When the air smells of stone, the sky will close. You sit listening to the storm's rhythm. The wind rattles, then pauses, then returns stronger, as if it were testing the camp's resolve. Each gust makes the walls tremble, but they hold. The lamps flicker, and people adjust them without fear. The cold presses close, but warmth answers it from within. A traveller's account from centuries ago mentions the strange comfort of being trapped in a snowstorm with these northern families. "They did not curse the cold," he wrote. "They sang to it." He described how, in the heart of the storm, soft voices rose in harmony, blending with the wind. The song was not for defiance, but gratitude for being together, for being alive, for hearing the storm instead of becoming part of it. The elder beside you begins such a song now, low and slow. The melody winds through the room, a thread of warmth weaving through fear. It has no clear beginning or end, only rise and fall. You close your eyes and let the sound carry you. The roar outside fades into something softer. For a moment, it feels like the storm is listening too. Historians still argue whether these songs were spiritual rituals or psychological tools for endurance. Some say they calmed fear by turning chaos into music. Others believe they were simply expressions of faith, that everything has its time. Whatever the truth, the effect is the same. The people relax, their breathing sinking with the melody, their shoulders lowering. The storm still rages, but inside, peace holds steady. Hours pass unnoticed. When the wind finally begins to weaken, the air inside grows warmer. The walls glow faintly as dawn light filters through packed snow. The room feels like a cocoon of gold and white. Someone pushes gently at the entrance, breaking through to the morning. Outside, the world is unrecognizable. Hills of snow shimmer where the ground once lay flat. The river has disappeared under a white plain. The air is calm again, the silence heavy and sweet. The people step out carefully, squinting at the brilliance. They smile, stretch, and breathe deeply. The storm has passed, and life continues. You stand in the glittering aftermath, the sun dazzling your eyes. The snow crunches softly beneath your feet, light and pure. All around you, the camp begins to move again, dogs shaking themselves free, children laughing, smoke curling upward. The world feels new, washed clean by the storm's breath. You realize that survival is not only about fighting the cold, but learning its rhythm. The storm came, roared, and left, but the people never truly feared it. They endured because they understood. Winter is alive, and if treated with respect, even its fury can be a kind of music. When you wake, the air feels still again, though the cold has sharpened overnight. The snow outside glitters like crushed glass. You breathe, and each exhale floats away as a small silver cloud. The storm has passed, but its memory lingers. You hear distant scraping and rhythmic thuds, people at work clearing paths and reshaping what the blizzard buried. The sky above is a sheet of pale gold. The world feels quiet but alive. You step outside and see that the camp is already moving. Snow walls have been reinforced, shelters brushed clean, sleds uncovered. Yet what strikes you most is not the rebuilding, it is the laughter. The storm that would have broken others has only brought these people closer. Someone calls out a greeting, another hums a soft tune. There is no sense of victory, just calm continuation. Historians who studied Arctic and subarctic peoples often described their recovery after storms as an act of ritual renewal. When the blizzard ended, work resumed not as chore, but as gratitude. The land had tested them and allowed them to remain. Each path cleared, each wall mended, was an offering of thanks. The snow was not their enemy, but their teacher, reminding them that endurance meant rhythm, not conquest. An explorer once wrote that the first hour after a storm was the most peaceful he had ever experienced. The air is softer, he said. The land seems to forgive. He noticed that people moved slowly, speaking little, as if acknowledging the balance restored between sky and earth. When he tried to rush back to hunting, his guides stopped him. "Wait until the snow settles," they said. "It needs to rest too." You join a group clearing ice from the entryway of a shelter. They use wooden shovels shaped like wide paddles, lifting snow in graceful arcs. Each motion is smooth, practiced. Children help, giggling as they toss small handfuls into the air. A woman nearby sprinkles fine ashes along the edges of the path to mark it against the wind. The dark line of ash cuts across the white snow, a visible thread leading home. Archaeologists have found traces of similar markings preserved under ancient drifts, lines of soot, crushed berries, or powdered charcoal. These were winter maps, guiding people between shelters or signaling where supplies were buried. Even in deep snow, knowledge left traces that survived the season. Modern field researchers now see them as evidence of quiet genius, systems of navigation perfectly adapted to shifting landscapes. A curious tradition, still remembered in oral stories, describes how entire camps would take a moment of silence after a storm before rebuilding. No one would speak until the first fire was lit again. The silence honored what the wind had taken and what it had spared. Only when the flame rose would conversation return. This small pause transformed survival into ceremony. Ethnographers believe such customs helped preserve mental balance through the long, relentless winters. After every storm, the quiet moment allowed people to process fear and exhaustion without denial. It was mindfulness before the word existed, a pause between destruction and renewal. You watch now as one of the elders lights a lamp in the open air. The wick sputters once, then steadies. The people gather around it, faces illuminated in soft gold. No words are said. The light itself speaks. You feel a warmth that is not only physical but deeply human. A missionary from the 18th century once described seeing this same ritual. He misunderstood it as worship of the flame. Later, he realized it was something else entirely. The people were not praying to the light, but with it. In a place where darkness ruled for months, tending the flame was a way of aligning heart and world, a promise that life would continue, no matter how fierce the wind. Modern climatologists studying post-storm air conditions have noted a curious phenomenon. After heavy snowfall, the air becomes cleaner, quieter, and softer to breathe. The snow absorbs sound and filters dust, creating a fragile stillness. The people who lived here did not need instruments to sense this change. They responded instinctively, turning stillness into gratitude. The camp gradually returns to life. Someone starts to cook. The smell of broth and smoked meat spreads through the crisp air. Dogs stretch and shake snow from their fur. Children run again, their laughter bouncing off the frozen trees. The world, moments ago buried and silent, now hums with motion. You kneel beside a young boy repairing a broken sled runner. His small hands move with surprising skill, smoothing the wood with a bit of stone. He glances up and grins. "Storm make us clean," he says softly. His accent bends the words, but the meaning is clear. You look around and see that he is right. Everything seems brighter, newer. The light on the snow dazzles, the air feels pure. An anthropologist once wrote that winter storms were not just obstacles but teachers of humility. They stripped life down to its essence, erasing waste and pride. What survived afterward was not only stronger but wiser. The people here had built a philosophy around that truth. Each hardship left the spirit lighter. As the day passes, the camp hums with quiet activity. Clothes are shaken out, furs aired, tools repaired. Children chase each other across the new drifts, leaving trails like weaving patterns in the white. The dogs curl in the sun, half asleep, but watchful. The rhythm of survival continues as naturally as breathing. You stand at the edge of the clearing and look toward the horizon. The mountains glow faintly in the distance, their peaks wrapped in cloud. The sky is vast, pale, and endlessly open. It feels less like a challenge and more like an invitation. The storm has passed, and in its wake everything seems sharper, clearer. As the sun lowers, the light turns honey gold. People gather for the evening meal. Steam rises from bowls of stew, the scent rich and earthy. Laughter floats between the shelters again, warm and steady. You realize that this is how they survive, not just the weather, but time itself through rhythm, through patience, through the unspoken understanding that every storm, no matter how fierce, eventually becomes silence and sunlight. You close your eyes, listening to the last whispers of wind along the ridge. The snow gleams under the first stars, smooth and forgiving. Somewhere behind you, the lamp still burns, its light small but eternal. You understand now that survival is not a single act of endurance, but a quiet repetition of faith. In this frozen world, even after the fiercest night, morning always finds its way back. Morning rises pale and soft, and the snow outside glows like a bed of crushed pearl. The air is so still that every breath feels like it might linger forever. From somewhere near the river, the sound of scraping drifts through the silence. You follow it, and find a small group of people working carefully over large blocks of ice. The scene looks serene, but the work they are doing is nothing short of remarkable. They are carving ice not just for shelter, but for tools, containers, and sometimes even art. The ice itself is clear and smooth, cut into perfect shapes with tools made from bone and stone. One man chips a block slowly, turning it into a shallow bowl. Another shaves thin sheets that glisten like glass. Children watch, helping to brush away the frost with soft furs. The air sparkles with tiny crystals. It feels sacred somehow, as though the cold itself has agreed to lend its beauty for a moment. Archaeologists have found evidence that indigenous peoples across the Arctic and northern plains used ice in ways that went far beyond shelter. They stored water within it, preserved food under it, and even used it to reflect light inside their lodges. In the long darkness of winter, a well-placed piece of clear ice could magnify the small glow of a lamp, turning one flame into many. An early explorer described seeing what he called a hall of mirrors inside a northern dwelling. He realized later that the walls had been lined with thin ice panels, melting slightly each day and refreezing at night. The result was a shimmer that made the space glow with silver light. It was practical and beautiful, science and art at once. A curious oral story told in some Arctic communities speaks of the breath of the moon, a spirit said to hide within clear ice. People were careful when cutting it, believing that if they broke it carelessly, they could anger the spirit who controlled the night sky. For this reason, they often sang softly while carving, their voices steady and gentle. Ethnographers who recorded these songs found them slow, almost lullaby-like, each verse thanking the ice for its strength and silence. Modern physicists have noted that the acoustic properties of dense winter ice can indeed carry sound in strange ways. It hums, vibrates, and sometimes even sings when the wind crosses it just right. To those who lived close to it, this sound must have felt alive. Perhaps that is why they treated it with such respect. You crouch beside one of the carvers as he shapes a thick sheet of ice into something resembling a window. He gestures for you to look closer. When you do, you see the distorted reflection of your own face shimmering back, eyes blurred, cheeks glowing red. He grins and says softly, "Now the sun will visit inside." He explains that the panel will be placed in the roof of a snow house to catch the light and filter it downward, making the interior glow like morning even at midday. Historians often note how these practical innovations carried a touch of poetry. Nothing was made purely for function. Everything also served a purpose of beauty. In the harshest months, beauty itself became warmth for the spirit. A polished tool, a carved pattern, a gleaming wall of ice, all were quiet declarations that life, even in cold, deserved grace. A missionary once wrote that he could always tell when the coldest months arrived, because that was when he saw the most decoration. Beads, feathers, polished stone, and ice carvings appeared everywhere. He had expected austerity, but instead he found color and detail. Later, he admitted that he finally understood. They keep beauty alive because it keeps them alive. Ethnographers studying these winter crafts have discovered that the process of making was as valuable as the final object. The carving of ice or bone, the weaving of sinew cords, the shaping of snow all provided rhythm, meditation, and purpose when the world outside slept. The repetition of careful motion calmed the mind and trained patience. You watch as the carvers finish their work. They carry the new ice panel to a nearby shelter and fit it into the roof opening. The moment they step back, sunlight filters through, scattering in 1,000 tiny rainbows. The children gasp and laugh. The inside of the shelter fills with shimmering light, soft and clean. For a few seconds, the frozen room feels warm, touched by something more than heat. A scholar once compared this act of crafting with prayer. "They carve their world brighter," she wrote. "Each mark on ice is an act of hope. You see that now? It is hope, not defiance, that fills this place. The people do not battle winter. They collaborate with it, shaping beauty from what would kill others." A young woman sits apart, etching small lines into a block of snow. When you move closer, you realize she is tracing the shapes of constellations, mapping the stars above onto frozen ground. Her hands are steady, her focus unbroken. The stars have always been their compass, but here, even in daylight, she brings them close. When the snow melts in spring, her map will vanish, but for now it holds the entire sky at her feet. Modern astronomers who have studied indigenous star lore often marvel at its accuracy. The stories that accompanied those constellations preserved not only navigation but memory. The stars were teachers of rhythm and return, their patterns reminding people that darkness never lasts forever. To trace them in snow was both art and affirmation. You sit quietly, watching the sunlight move across the ice. The air glows gold, and your reflection blurs into the shimmer. The scene is so still that time feels suspended. Every tool, every wall, every piece of ice glistens with quiet purpose. The people here have turned the frozen world into something alive, living glass, living light, living silence. When the sun begins to sink, the carvers cover their tools and return to the fire. The ice panels gleam in the dimming light, still holding the glow of day. You follow them, your breath rising into the crisp evening air. Behind you, the ice hums faintly as it cools, a sound like soft singing carried through the snow. You smile, realizing that this music, born from frozen water, has accompanied these people for centuries. It speaks without words, just as they do with patience, precision, and grace. The lesson is simple and endless. Even in a land of ice, warmth can be made not only from flame, but from the act of creation itself. The morning arrives calm again, washed clean by sunlight. Frost clings to the edges of every branch, and the trees shimmer like silver lace. The cold bites your cheeks, but it feels somehow softer, as though the world has decided to rest. You hear the rhythmic sound of scraping hides near the fire. The people are working together, turning the gifts of the hunt into warmth that will last for years. You move closer and see layers of animal skins stretched across wooden frames. The smell is strong, a mix of smoke, fat, and snow. Men and women scrape the hides with sharpened bones, removing the last bits of flesh. Children help, gathering flakes of frost and tossing them aside. The sound of scraping repeats like a slow drumbeat. It is a quiet labor, steady and sure. Archaeologists have found evidence of this process in nearly every northern settlement site ever uncovered. The tanning and softening of hides were not simply chores. They were acts of survival performed with artistry and skill. Each hide could become a shelter, a coat, a blanket, or a tool. In a place where warmth meant life, the transformation of animal skin into comfort was a sacred duty. A French explorer once described spending an afternoon watching women soften moose hides. He said they worked in silence, their movements fluid and strong. They soaked the hides in water mixed with crushed brains or liver, then stretched them over poles, pulling until the fibers loosened. He wrote, "They make leather the way others make poetry by patience." Ethnographers who studied the process later confirmed that the method was ingenious. The oils from the animal's own body worked as a natural conditioner, keeping the hide supple even in freezing temperatures. No chemical treatment could equal it. The hides were then smoked gently over low fires, filling them with scent and protection. Smoke not only darkened the color, but preserved them against decay and insects. You run your hand over a finished hide hanging nearby. It feels soft as velvet, warm even in the cold air. The texture is unlike anything you've touched before, strong, yet almost alive. The elder beside you smiles and says quietly, "The animal still gives." You realize that for them, death does not end the relationship between human and creature. Each hide, each bone, each piece of sinew continues to serve. A curious story told among the northern Cree speaks of the spirit of the moose visiting a woman in her dreams. The spirit asks that when its body is used, it be treated with respect so it can find its way back to the forest. The next day, the woman awoke and began to teach her daughters how to prepare hides with songs of gratitude. From then on, each time they scraped or stretched the skin, they sang softly to honor the animal's spirit. Modern anthropologists note that this combination of work and song had a practical benefit too. The rhythm of the music matched the pace of the labor, ensuring that no one worked too fast or too long in the cold. The songs kept breath steady, muscles relaxed, and hands warm. Science now confirms what tradition already knew: steady movement and focused rhythm preserve energy better than bursts of force. You watch as the workers hang fresh hides near the fire. Smoke curls gently around them, staining them golden brown. The air smells rich, earthy, alive. The children dance around the edges, laughing at the shadows their bodies cast on the skins. The adults smile but keep working, their hands sure. The movement is hypnotic. Stretch, scrape, fold, breathe. The firelight flickers on their faces, softening the edges of the long day. An explorer's journal once mentioned that, during the darkest months, people often tanned hides late into the night simply for the comfort of routine. They scrape through the silence, he wrote. The rhythm gives the mind something to hold. He described how the sound of hide against bone became a lullaby that lulled the camp to sleep. Modern psychologists have written about the calming effect of repetitive craft in traditional cultures. The rhythm quiets the mind, turning anxiety into focus. The body remembers what the heart forgets, that patience itself can be warmth. Watching them now, you understand that better than any book could explain. When the hides are ready, they are folded carefully and stored in bundles. Each bundle represents days of work and countless small gestures of care. Nothing about the process is hurried. Every movement shows respect, not just for the material, but for the cycle of giving that sustains life here. A woman sits nearby sewing fur edges onto a newly softened hide. Her needle is a sliver of bone, her thread a strip of sinew. The stitches are tiny, perfect. She hums a low tune as she works. Her daughter watches, eyes wide, hands mimicking the motions. This is how knowledge passes through watching, touching, remembering. Some historians have suggested that the artistry of these garments rivaled anything found in early European courts. Embroidery, beadwork, and dyed patterns were not simply decoration but language. Colors could mark family lines, tribe, or story. A single coat might tell generations of history stitched into its seams. When the cold pressed hardest, the garments became both shield and identity, warmth wrapped in meaning. You look up as the sky begins to change. The sun lowers, spilling long pink streaks across the snow. The air turns still again. The hides hanging near the fire shimmer faintly, catching the light. The camp smells of smoke and leather, of labor and life. You realize that in this world, work is not only about survival, it is also about connection. The elder who spoke before now adds another hide to the rack. He glances toward you and says softly, "We do this so the cold remembers our hands." You smile, unsure if he's teasing or teaching, maybe both. As the evening deepens, the workers finish their tasks. The tools are cleaned, the hides folded. Someone begins to sing again, the melody slow and soothing. You close your eyes and listen to the rhythm of the song and the faint crackle of the fire. The smell of smoke lingers on your clothes and in your hair, a reminder of the day's work. In the silence that follows, you understand that warmth does not come only from fire or shelter, but from hands that create and care. The hides may shield the body, but it is the act of making them, the patience, the gratitude that shields the spirit. You breathe deeply, the scent of the smoked leather filling your lungs. The air feels sacred, heavy with memory. The cold remains outside, harmless now, kept at bay not by walls, but by the quiet strength of human hands. The cold settles once more across the land, but this time it feels gentler, as if the long winter has softened into acceptance. You step out into the grey morning, and the air feels clean, unhurried. The river lies buried beneath white silence, and smoke drifts lazily from the shelters. Inside the camp, people are beginning to prepare for the next turning of the season. The end of winter is still far away, yet every gesture carries quiet anticipation. A few figures sit near the fire, sewing thicker patches into clothing, tightening sled bindings, repairing tools dulled by months of use. Others weave cords from sinew or twist new ropes from animal hair. Everything that has endured the cold must be made ready for the thaw. There is no sense of hurry, only rhythm. You realize that this endless maintenance is what makes life possible here. The care for the small, the steady attention to detail. Historians studying traditional winter life have often remarked that the art of survival was hidden in ordinary gestures, The cold was not defeated through great inventions or sudden bursts of courage, but through daily acts of persistence. A repaired seam, a cleaned knife, a rope checked for weakness each task, repeated 1,000 times, kept the community alive. An explorer once wrote that he never heard complaints during these chores. Instead, he found people humming softly or telling small jokes as they worked. They tend their world as if it were a living thing, he observed. Every stitch, every polish, is an apology to the cold for daring to survive it. You sit beside a woman mending a tear in her cloak. Her fingers move quickly, looping sinew through thick fur. She shows you how the stitch must lie flat, how it should bend with the fabric rather than pull against it. She smiles and says quietly, "The wind finds every weakness. You must give it no place to rest." You nod, realizing that her words are not just about sewing. Archaeologists examining ancient winter camps have found that even broken tools were rarely discarded. Bone handles were reshaped, metal edges recast over coals, sinew rebraided. The people wasted nothing. Everything was seen as part of a cycle of endurance. A cracked knife could live again. A torn coat could serve another winter. Survival was not about perfection, but renewal. A curious note from an old fur trader tells of seeing hunters melt broken arrowheads back into usable shapes over small fires. The trader asked why they did not make new ones instead. The hunter laughed and said, "The spirit of this one already knows the way." To him, every object carried memory, a link between past hunts and future journeys. Modern researchers believe that this belief in continuity made material care a spiritual act. Ethnographers later wrote that this practice extended even to the care of shelters. After each storm or cold snap, the people reinforced their snow walls, patched tiny holes with ice or moss, and retied the bindings that held hides together. The structures grew stronger over time, reshaped by weather and attention. When they finally melted in spring, they left behind smooth, perfect circles where warmth had once lived. You help carry water from the river to soften hides for patching. The surface ice cracks gently beneath your weight, revealing dark, slow water below. The sound is rich and deep, like breathing. You fill a wooden bowl and glance up at the horizon, where faint light glows behind clouds. Even now, the world feels vast and quiet, waiting for change. An anthropologist once described winter as a slow dialogue between endurance and faith. He wrote that patience became its own form of intelligence, a way of thinking shaped by time and necessity. The people here did not rush towards spring. They lived within the stillness, trusting that it would eventually shift. That trust, more than anything, kept them whole. You return to the camp and hand the bowl to the woman repairing her cloak. She nods and thanks you with a smile. Around the fire, others work in the same silence, each movement deliberate and full of care. The air smells of smoke, fat and pine. You feel the warmth seep into your bones, deeper than before, more enduring. Nearby, a young man carves small shapes from bone. When you look closer, you see tiny birds, each one perfectly detailed. He explains that he makes them as offerings to the coming season. When the snow melts, he says, the birds return. We remind them we have been waiting. His tone is simple, but there is reverence in his voice. A French missionary once wrote of seeing similar carvings left in tree hollows at winter's end. At first he called it superstition, but later he admitted it was something else, entirely a declaration of continuity. These people did not fear change. They prepared for it with grace. The act of making beauty was itself a kind of prayer. Modern psychologists studying resilience in traditional societies often point to this quiet creativity as the secret to survival. Making something, even something small, reminded people that they still had agency in the face of endless cold. Repairing, building, carving, these were acts of affirmation, proof that life could continue on its own terms. The light fades slowly. The camp finishes its work and gathers around the fire. Someone begins a song, gentle and slow, the kind that seems to rise naturally from breath. It is a song of gratitude for endurance. The words are simple, a repetition of images. Snow, fire, breath, heart. The rhythm carries you, calming and endless. You close your eyes and feel the song vibrate through the ground. Outside, the cold deepens, but the warmth inside grows stronger. You think of the woman's words again. Give the wind no place to rest. You understand now that she meant more than stitching seams. She meant to keep moving, keep mending, keep believing. The night stretches long and peaceful. The lamps flicker softly, the air filled with scent and sound. Tomorrow will bring new tasks, new frost, perhaps another storm. But for now, everything feels complete. The people have faced the cold and shaped it into something steady, something human. You lie back, listening to the fire crackle. Your eyes drift closed, and the sound of the song lingers in your ears. It repeats softly, a lullaby of endurance. The last thing you see before sleep claims you is a curl of smoke rising through the roof and vanishing into the quiet night, carrying warmth to the stars. Morning arrives without a sound. The light outside the shelter glows through the hides, soft and pale like milk poured over frost. You sit up slowly, feeling the warmth of the furs against your skin and the faint crackle of embers beside you. When you step outside, the air greets you gently. It no longer stings as it once did. The season is changing. The camp is calm. Smoke curls from a few lamps, and dogs stretch lazily, their tails flicking snow into the air. People move more slowly now. The urgency that once filled each day has faded into a kind of quiet balance. They are not fighting the cold anymore. They are living with it, trusting it. You realize that the story of their survival is not one of struggle, but of harmony. You walk to the river. It lies beneath a shell of melting ice, whispering softly as the water stirs below. The sound feels alive, almost like laughter under glass. You crouch down and touch the surface. It's smoother now, wetter, the first sign that the deep freeze is beginning to ease its grip. The wind carries a faint scent of pine and earth, the promise of something green waiting beneath the snow. Archaeologists studying ancient northern settlements often speak of this time of year as the quiet threshold. Food stores are still full, tools repaired, and traps still yield. The people have learned the rhythm of endurance so well that even transition feels effortless. They wait for the thaw not with impatience, but with respect, understanding that every season must end in its own time. An explorer once wrote that the calm before spring in these camps felt holy. It is as if the land itself exhales, he said, and the people breathe with it. He noticed that no one rushed to move camp even when the ice began to crack. They watched, listened, and waited for the exact moment when the earth invited them onward. You turn and see families preparing their belongings. Tools are being sorted, sleds repaired one last time. Children run between shelters, collecting small things left behind, an old bone carving, a handful of beads, a strip of cloth. Every object has a place and a memory. Nothing is abandoned carelessly. The people treat even the remnants of winter with the tenderness one gives to an old friend. A curious legend tells of a spirit who visits at the end of winter to measure how humans have behaved. She carries no fire or wind, only a basket. If the people have wasted nothing, she fills it with light. If they have disrespected the cold, she takes that light away. No one fears her. They simply live in such a way that her basket always overflows. Ethnographers later said that this story likely served as a reminder to live mindfully, to respect both scarcity and abundance. Historians have long debated whether the extraordinary endurance of these communities was born from necessity or philosophy. Some argue that wisdom came from hardship. Others say it existed long before, woven into the land itself. Whatever the truth, you can feel the result in every movement around you. Calm, careful, rooted in gratitude. You sit beside an elder near the fire. His eyes are half closed, his hands steady as he feeds the lamp another drop of oil. He speaks softly, his voice barely above the sound of the flame. When the cold comes, he says, we thank it. When it leaves, we thank it again. It teaches us how strong we already are. You nod, knowing there is no need to reply. Modern scientists who have studied these ancient lifeways often conclude that their survival was not simply physical adaptation but emotional balance. They endured the unendurable by finding beauty in small things, the glow of a lamp, the softness of fur, the song of wind through ice. This quiet resilience has outlasted empires, still carried in stories, still whispered by rivers that refuse to freeze forever. You watch as the people finish their morning work. Someone begins to sing again, a song older than memory. The words speak of return, the geese that will soon darken the sky, the rivers that will open, the first shoots of grass breaking through the frost. The melody rises slowly, as soft as breath, carrying through the camp until even the dogs lift their heads to listen. The fire burns low, and the sunlight deepens. The snow that once swallowed the world now glitters like a mirror, reflecting the endless blue above. You take one last look at the camp, the smoke, the laughter, the shimmering white, and realize that this is the true warmth of humanity. Not heat, not fire, connection, patience, trust. You close your eyes and let the silence settle. Somewhere far away, the river cracks louder, as if reminding you that change is already on its way. You smile, feeling both humbled and whole. The people will move again soon, carrying their homes, their dogs, their stories. The cold will follow them, but so will the light. And as you stand in that fragile peace, you understand that the miracle of survival was never about conquering nature. It was about learning to listen to the snow, to the wind, to each other. The old wisdom lingers in the air like breath on frozen glass. Warmth is not something you find, it is something you build together, one quiet heartbeat at a time. The light softens, and the world grows still. You can almost hear the snow melting, the faint trickle of water beneath the ice, the long, slow sigh of winter releasing its hold. Around you, everything feels hushed, weightless. The smoke from the lamps curls upward in thin spirals, fading into the dim ceiling of the sky. You breathe deeply. The air tastes of cold and smoke and quiet memory. The sound of the wind has changed. It no longer howls but hums, low and gentle like a lullaby from the earth itself. Each breath slows your heartbeat. Each exhale carries away the last of the storm. The people around you settle into rest. Some hum softly, others close their eyes beside the steady glow of the lamps. The dogs curl near the entrances, content and dreaming. The scent of fur and tallow drifts through the air, warm and familiar. You feel your body relax, your shoulders sinking, your thoughts drifting loose like snowflakes caught in still air. The cold remains outside, respectful now, watching but no longer pressing close. Inside, there is only the sound of quiet breathing, the faint crackle of the fire, the soft rhythm of hearts. You realize that this is how winter ends, not with noise or struggle, but with peace. You close your eyes. The last of the light fades into the softness of night. The fire dims, but its warmth lingers. Somewhere outside, an owl calls once, slow and low. The world exhales again, and everything grows still. Rest now. You have walked through the storm, felt the ice, seen the lamps, and heard the quiet songs of survival. The cold has no hold here anymore. Only warmth remains. Only silence. Only sleep.